OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
7:30 this Tuesday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Ger Gilroy and Eoin Sheahan with you all the way through until 10 as ever. We want your involvement in the show. You can text us on 0879 180 180, or you can leave us a comment about anything we're covering on the show. Maybe you're a Fulham fan in devastation this morning. You've come to the right place, because we're not really going to talk about Fulham on today's show. They've slipped so far off our radar that the official announcement of their relegation, confirmation rather than an announcement of their relegation last night against Burnley, isn't actually on our running list today. We're going to talk about the Irish players who need a move this summer. We're going to talk about the situation in Camogie. We're going to talk about the Joe McDonagh Cup. We're going to talk about everything else that's happening in the world of sport today, and anything that you want us to cover, we will do. But we've got to start with somebody finally adding a bit of spice to the All-Ireland Football Championship. I don't know if you're a lover of sports conspiracy theories, but this year the NFL draft was supposed to be very boring. It was going to be a really low number of people watching it, and then Aaron Rodgers dropped a bomb that he was interested in moving from the Green Bay Packers, and the audience was the third most watched of all time. This year's Football Championship, we were kind of limping into it. There wasn't that much to whet the appetite. It looks like it's going to be a fairly straight-run thing for Dublin, who don't really have a meaningful game until the All-Ireland semi-final, because the Leinster Football Championship is a joke. And then, yesterday, Peter Keane went full Aaron Rodgers. What happened, Owen?
Wrong and unfair. Keane hits out at virus breaches is the headline on the Irish Examiner this morning. It's the lead on a lot of newspapers this morning as well. Peter Keane doing his first press conference of the year ahead of the new season. Kerry playing this weekend against Galway, and he's been talking about the Dubs breaching COVID restrictions. He's been talking about Monaghan and Cork as well, in fairness. He didn't necessarily mention Cork specifically, but it's more to do with people who did break COVID restrictions to go and train a bit earlier than others. He said it was wrong, it was unfair. I think it was unfair on society in general. I think it was a view that we took, that we were all in this together, and some of these counties breached the COVID guidelines, and I don't believe they should have. Did it bring any pressure? And I don't, like this is one of the interesting themes that kind of came up around this conversation, was surely all the other counties are doing it, and if not, do they feel a little bit like idiots at the moment? Did it bring pressure? In the early part, I think it did, yes. We took a view down here that we weren't going to do it, that we weren't going to try and break the guidelines. We were going to try and look out for all these people. He mentions his own mother and looking after her and trying to keep her safe, and I guess he says that there could have been a pressure where some players could have said, Jesus, why aren't we doing this? So he's obviously been asked about this at a press conference. He was asked about a lot of things, and he didn't really get into a couple of things, maybe with regards to the punishment that was dished out to these teams, but I think he was pretty happy to head out and say that these things were wrong and unfair. So a little bit of a match lit under the start of the National League campaign, because I think there's been a sense over the last few weeks that it was like, sure, it was just lads kicking a ball around. It's no big deal, and sure, that's the past. We're out of that now. Everything is safe at this point, and sure, no one got hurt in the end from what actually happened. So
well, we don't know that, do we?
We don't know about that for sure, but let's all move on. Certainly is how I felt the story had gone. Not just yet, it seems.
I think what the other counties did was wrong. I think it was unfair. I think it was unfair on society in general. The view was that we were all in this together. And look, some of these counties breached the COVID guidelines, and I don't believe they should have. The view was that we were all in this together. That was what people were texting in at the time. Like, there's a strain of people who believe, sure, look, what's the big deal? Outdoors, everybody should have been allowed to do it anyway, right? That's definitely one view. And then there is another view of people who were looking after or caring for people who had COVID or who were immunocompromised, and they have diametrically opposed views. And on the morning that we were covering the story, we were getting both sides through on the YouTube comments and by WhatsApp. You pay some money, you take your choice, and that is a choice that you make. You know, everybody out there had to make up their own minds. But it's really interesting that Peter Keane has decided, instead of just saying, yeah, nothing to do with us, everybody had to look after their own, they made their decision, we made ours, we're happy with ours. It's like, no, I believe that was the wrong thing to do. That adds a bit of spice to the championship, right?
It does, and like, it's because it's...
There's no way around it. This adds a little bit of spice.
Like, he was always going to be somebody whose voice was going to be interesting to hear on it, because it was Cork and Dublin, and if there's one county who share I guess, who have the two of them right up at the top of their pedestal of teams that they dislike or counties that they dislike in a friendly way, of course.
Enemy's enemy is my friend.
It would be Kerry, so it was always going to be interesting to see what he had to say. Like, forgetting all the actual, I don't know, the small health risk or whatever way you want to paint it. It'll be a big health risk to some people, small health risk to others, and the COVID restrictions. I think that maybe this boils down to just rules and breaching rules. And if you are involved in a county who didn't breach rules over the last couple of months, say, for example, if there is a club month, I know that's not going to happen again, hopefully. If there is a club month, though, for example, next year, and there is some sort of rule in place for you to not train with your county team during this club month, do you think Peter Keane, for example, would be like, yeah, just let them off the clubs because I'm sure everybody's playing by the rules? Probably not, to be honest. I think that there is this sense that actually we do what we want because we are the GAA. And again, it's nothing to do with COVID. It's only, we said it that morning when that story came out in the Irish Independent that, I mean, to be outraged by people training in a park, you probably need to get a bit of a life. It's just the idea of some counties feeling that they were bigger than the rules that were in place. And in particular, when it came to Dublin, it was just, it kind of left a sour taste in the mouth a little bit. Now, to be honest with you, I kind of expected, through no information of my own, I heard nothing. I kind of expected Kerry were training. I kind of expected all the top counties were training. And I think that maybe speaks to the attitude that I feel exists within the GAA of people just saying, screw you to the rules.
And it turns out they weren't.
Well, like, I mean, it's one hell of an impassioned speech if they were training, and Peter Keane's coming out with this sort of stuff. I think you would certainly have a lot of fortitude to come out and say that this sort of stuff if you were.
And so I don't believe they were. So let me ask you then, as a Kerry supporter, right? Put aside journalism, broadcasting.
No.
Put it all aside, right? As a Kerry supporter, did you want them to be training?
God, that's no, not necessarily. I don't think so.
Not necessarily is not a yes or no. This is a yes or no.
I hadn't really
I'm asking you now.
Had you thought about that? Had you thought about Kildare?
Yeah, I wanted them not to be training.
You wanted them not to be training. So what? Like, why did you come to that decision? Was it because that they were ambassadors?
No, I'm asking you, and you're filling for time. You're filibustering here. This is a Kerry team who are on the verge of winning an All Ireland in their minds, and who have been within a kick of a ball of stopping the greatest team of all time. And you know that the Dubs were doing 9-a-side training sessions. Did you, as a Kerry fan, in retrospect, do you wish they had been training? Did you want them to be training while COVID was on?
No, I didn't want them to be training while COVID was on. Absolutely not. And that's probably because of the whole image of it. That I guess I had this prejudice that was like, oh, Kerry GAA will definitely be out training because maybe there's this kind of cute hooer nature that has been painted of the team, and I just expected that they were doing it. Didn't necessarily want it. If you ask me, did I want it? Like, I mean, who cares? Nobody at home cares whether or not I wanted to see Kerry training or not.
Oh, but I'm asking you as a fan.
To answer your question, not really, no. Like, but in hindsight then, when you see that other counties were doing it, you're like, should they possibly have been doing it because they're losing a competitive
today
they're losing a competitive edge?
And if they lose in injury time in a 1-point game in an All-Ireland final,
was that down to the fact that, well, to be honest with you, it looks like that they were doing a hell of a lot of work on Peloton or something. Peter Keane says we've done so much remote cycling. So maybe they didn't...
Answer the question.
Did I want Kerry to be training during COVID? To be honest with you...
Now that you found out that the Dubs and Monaghan were and loads of other counties were.
I actually don't care. Like, you may think that this is a big deal. I actually don't care all that much. I do think it's interesting that certain counties did break the rules and certain counties didn't. I was of the opinion that all the counties were going to be breaking the rules. That was my opinion of the GAA. The more I read about it now, the more I'm starting to realise that actually there were a few counties who felt that they were above the law and a few counties who felt that they should abide by the law. And that, in hindsight, is disappointing. Now, it's a completely hypocritical thing to say, but yes, if they get beaten by 1 point in an All-Ireland final, probably won't happen. Dublin are not going to be winning any game by 1 point this year. But if that does happen, you might look back at this time and there will be some things said in a WhatsApp group saying they should have been back training. They should have been up on quarantine.
Will you be sending that message? Will you be like forward to everybody in my address book?
Everybody will. Like, I mean, anybody who supports a county who wasn't caught training over the last few months and they get beaten by Cork or Monaghan or Dublin, by a small margin. Of course, there will be a tongue-in-cheek while they say it, but people will nonetheless say, God, could they have done just that little bit more? Could they have just risked themselves that little bit more and their image? But no, all in all, is it going to make that much of a difference? Maybe not. There's still a couple of months to go before the business end of the championship sets in. Kerry obviously started the league very well last year, and they hammered Donegal the final day of the league, and then we all know what happened in the championship. So there was no need to be going back training that early, as long as they were doing their fitness work.
Many a true word is spoken in jest, as they say. Right, just very briefly on this final point. We will be doing the contenders today, by the way. We're doing the dubs with Conor McKeon after 9 o'clock in our contenders series of pre-season analysis, and obviously we're covering the dubs, who aren't really, you would say, contenders, but are shoe-in favourites according to most people. So just the final bit of news on this comes from the Irish Independent this morning. It's Kevin Doyle with the exclusive. Members of Dublin GAA football squad who took part in a secret training session have escaped fines for breaching COVID-19 restrictions. So while they're getting slaughtered on the back pages, on the front pages, it has emerged that the Gardaí said, nothing to see here, no fines have been issued, and it looks as well, the Irish Independent are reporting, although it's not finalised, that Monaghan will also avoid any suspension or any fines. The individuals that will involved will avoid any fines. There were, of course, handed down 12-week suspensions, and those 12-week suspensions, we know that's like a really damaging time of the year when all the best work is done. Right on? Yeah,
the other thing on the Examiner, McCarthy will be on the sideline for Cork's league opener. Ronan McCarthy is back this weekend, so his ban is over in time.
What did he miss? What did he miss? The time when they couldn't train?
It was 12 weeks.
Right.
But yeah, like it's interesting. So this is Owen Cormacan's piece. He has got quotes here from Sean Hayes, who is a selector with Cork, but he's still a little bit peeved about the fact that he got a 12-week ban and Paddy Talley only got 8 weeks. He says, I'm not going to speak on Ronan's behalf. Yes, we're concerned that he got 12 weeks. Yes, we're concerned that Talley got his reduced by 4 weeks and Ronan didn't. But we didn't take part in any of the conversations Ronan had with the GAA trying to appeal the decision. To be honest with you, Cork got off brilliantly there. I mean, 12-week ban for your manager and your back pot at the start of the National League, that is an absolute win. I don't know why anybody's calling for any concern just because some other manager got a 4 week of a shorter ban.
Give us your views, 0879 180 180. Of course, you can leave a comment on the YouTube channel if you want, or wherever. You can get us on Twitter, you can get us on Instagram. We're all over the place, as you know by now if you're listening to us. And for those of you who are consuming us on the podcast, which goes live every morning at 10 a.m, you're very welcome as well, and we'd love to hear from you too. You can always email us feedback@offtheball.com if you want it. It's 7:43 this morning. Time for us to turn our attention to the Irish footballers who need a big summer. It's been one of those years where there hasn't been a big year from many Irish footballers, particularly those who were attached to Premier League teams. We were doing this list over the last few days, and it was like, they're still at that Premier League club even though they haven't played for them, or they're currently on loan somewhere else. You've been doing a lot of work on this, Owen, and this is not a very pretty list for Stephen Kenny at the moment.
Not when it comes to the senior players. So this morning anyway, we might try and do this over the course of the next few days, is to go through some of the players who are going to be in and around Stephen Kenny's squad over the next few years. There's a lot of young players, a lot of players who've come through the academy, who are playing under 23s football around the Premier League, that the future looks really bright on. We'll get to that another day. This is about the stalwarts of Irish football, or those that have been stalwarts of Irish football for the last 5 years or more. And one place you wanted to start is at Everton and at Seamus Coleman's door. The contract for life that Carlo Ancelotti has spoken about with regard to Seamus Coleman. I did not have this guy on the list as a man who had an important summer. I'm not going to lie.
Show me the money. That's all I'm saying, Carlo. Show me the money. So we were talking about this on the show yesterday. Who was the man of the match and blah, 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 Calvert-Lewin or whoever. And Ancelotti comes out and goes, no, man of the match was Seamus Coleman, right? Coleman has been excellent when he's been fit this year. And look, he's at that stage of his career where it's very unlikely he's going to move at this point. Many people would say, why would you bother moving? But if you think back to some of those great careers that weren't in the end one club careers, where at the end of it somebody had a year or two, like a Frank Lampard, for example, who was a one club man, essentially. That's what people think about, and then they forget about the fact that he goes to City for a season, then he goes to New York for a while. Maybe Seamus Coleman thinks down the line, actually, it will be no harm for me to have other experiences of other clubs if I'm going to go into club management, because I don't know, maybe coaching and management is not part of his future. Maybe the family move back to Donegal and they just have the time of their lives, and he becomes involved in the Gaelic football team in Killybegs, or the Donegal inter-county setup. Who knows what the future holds for Seamus Coleman? I hope it is centrally involved in running Irish sport. But if Everton are going to actually give him all the money that he deserves, then why not play a season for somebody else? And if you're one of those top teams, Coleman's performances at right back, at right wing back, as the third man in a three-man defence would suggest that he could legitimately hold his own or play a role for almost any team in the Premier League. Would Man United not be happy having him as the third man in a trio of central defenders, suddenly adding a little bit of pace to the slow coaches beside him, or as the right wing back, or as somebody to teach Arwan Bissaka, this is how you're supposed to play, right? So Bissaka plays 70% of the games, Coleman plays the other 30%, but suddenly there's strength and depth. And in the big European games, you're like, come on now, Seamus, come on.
That would make sense from Manchester United's perspective for him to play 30% of the games, because I think that's probably all he would get. He's not getting ahead of Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Aaron Wan-Bissaka's had a really good season, and he's getting better when it comes to the offensive part of his game. Everton are in 8th at the moment, so you're looking at teams above them in the Premier League if you're Seamus Coleman. You're looking at teams above them that he can actually get meaningful minutes for. Like, I mean,
but meaningful minutes, like if you think about that, everybody changes. So, like, you know, Chelsea have played Reece James a lot, but not every game.
No.
They've played Cesar Azpilicueta a lot. But, like, put him in that Cesar Azpilicueta role, for example. Plays a lot of football.
Yeah, like, I mean, but so then he's contending with Cesar Azpilicueta, Reece James.
He's not going to. He's not going to go to Chelsea, right?
Yeah.
But you could put him in the team for that. Like,
but my point is that you have to be looking at, if you're actually making a case for Seamus Coleman to leave
free
Everton,
transfer, essentially, right?
Yeah, then you have to be looking at clubs like, there's only a certain amount of them. Like West Ham maybe is the weakest club above Everton in the Premier League right now, and I mean they've got right back nailed down this season. Like I just
Seamus Coleman would be brilliant at Man City. Seamus Coleman would be brilliant at Manchester United.
But Seamus Coleman is not going to go and not play for next season. But like we're talking about this summer.
He doesn't have to play every minute, that's the thing.
I know, but do you actually think that he is the type of player who's
Could he play 15
happy
games? Could he play 15 games for City or 15 games for Manchester United in big games next season? Yes, he could.
But is he going to be happy with that?
Well, I mean, it's a completely different period to your career where you all of a sudden are experiencing what life is like at a super club, so that in the future, when it comes to them making coaching decisions or staff decisions, you're like, I have experience of this, I have seen this, I have worked with the best players in the world. I just think that there's like there's the immediate short term where we have a qualifying campaign coming up, and Seamus Coleman is going to be like one of our most important players, because he's still going to be one of our best players for the next 3 or 4 years, it looks like at this stage, right? And he's got the rest of his career and his life to think about after that. And staying at Everton is a really brilliant thing to do. To be a one-club player in the Premier League, obviously he played for Sligo, but that's like a hugely unusual, and the loyalty that he'll have there and the club legend status that he'll have there, I don't think that's going to be damaged if Coleman leaves. And I just think that it would be brilliant for him to explore playing anywhere else in the Premier League, really, with any of those good teams, or if he plays with a bad team, like with a coaching role associated with it, then that would be interesting. Like, could he improve any of the other teams in that top half? What would happen if he moved to Leeds, for example, and played under Bielsa and experienced what that culture was like? I just think, like...
Yeah, like he improves every team he goes to, because he becomes a squad player, and he becomes maybe not your starting right back in a lot of cases, or as you said, like right midfielder / right wing back, whatever the position might be. He definitely improves every squad he goes into, just on a depth level. Like, he is working with Carlo Ancelotti right now. He is working with some unbelievably talented players in that Everton squad. He is still... I'd say he's getting great fulfilment from this season. I just think that if you're picking one Premier League player who's Irish at the moment, who isn't likely to leave at all this summer, and it makes no sense for him to leave, it is Seamus Coleman. I think Everton have had a really good season.
Pay him his money then. Show him the love and show him the respect that he deserves, instead of saying he's got a contract for life. Give him the money.
Well, okay, that's where you get into the real point here, that if Everton feel that this is now a situation where you're going to get diminishing returns from Seamus Coleman, and that they don't actually cough up the money, or they don't cough up a long enough contract, like, could Everton turn around to him and say, here's a 1-year deal? Maybe not. Like, they'll surely give him 2 years at least, and maybe there's just not enough money on the line. Then maybe Coleman's not happy. That's where the situation changes. But what we know is that he is working under a manager who has won the Champions League, one of the best managers of the last 20 years, Well, let's start one of the most successful managers.
Yeah,
over the
I
last
mean,
5
come on,
years.
we all watch what happened in
So, some great players.
Istanbul.
Some great young players. He's got a leadership role in that club. He's got an absolute avenue into the coaching staff in that club if he hangs around until he finishes. But I just think that from his own perspective and what actually happens next season for him, there just isn't a situation that would be better than Everton for him right now. Like, in a weird way, the one big club who might go to and actually succeed at is Tottenham. He might go ahead of Matt Doherty in the Tottenham pecking order. He might go right ahead of Serge Aurier in the Tottenham pecking order. Tottenham signed Matt Doherty to be their fix at right back, and it has not worked. So Tottenham still need a fix at right back unless Aurier finds more consistency next season. So that's weirdly the only situation you could find, but that is very much in the realms of Football Manager, I think, to see Seamus Coleman going to Spurs.
Give us your views. 087 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. It's 7:51 this morning. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Give me the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Peter G says, I take Coleman at Arsenal. Joe on WhatsApp says, Coleman missed his chance to move. Should have left Everton 4 or 5 years ago and gone to Manchester United. He'd have become club captain in no time and sorted out that dressing room. I mean, if Moyes had signed Coleman, would life have been different? Would Moyes still be the manager? Would it have completely changed? It might have. Right, very quickly, who else do you want to do here?
So next up, let's just go through. We'll go through the Brighton contingent. I know we're kind of tied for time, but there's only so much we can say about these streaks. I think everybody knows that it's a big summer for Aaron Connolly. It is a big summer for Jason Malumbi, and it is of course a big summer for Shane Duffy. We might start with Shane Duffy. Back with Brighton, cut his loan move at Celtic short, obviously, got injured. He's got 2 more years left in his deal. Graham Potter obviously had dropped him before he left for Celtic. Like, the precipitous decline of Shane Duffy is not confined within the walls of Parkhead. It certainly seemed to be happening at the Amex before he left. Everybody thought it was a blip and then he could have found himself again at Celtic. It has not happened. Now the thing is, was Celtic just too big a club almost? And that's not to diminish Shane Duffy's talents or what he's shown down through the years, but just almost the expectation that is on a defender like him, the way that they play, the way they're expected to win every game, that you just wonder if somewhere else lower down the Premier League would have been a better move for him. Now, it would have just been hard to see what team he would have got into, except for maybe the clubs that got promoted into the Premier League last season. So as a result, you're thinking to yourself that Shane Duffy maybe needs to drop down a division to actually get his game time, and I think that's probably what might happen. Is he going to sit on the bench for next season? Like, it depends what Brighton do in the off-season, but it's another year in the Premier League. It's another year where they've settled into this division, and I don't think they're going to revert to Shane Duffy as a starter. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch over the course of this summer. Just to mention the other two then, Jason Malumbi, obviously, who we've been a big fan of on this show for the last little while. Hasn't been a great season for him. Like, he's been left more on the bench as the season's gone on in his loan move. Obviously, we were speaking to him during his Millwall loan last year, which was going really well. With Preston North End this year, it just hasn't gone as well. Like, it's hard to see him getting much game time at Brighton in the near future. Again, as I say, Brighton may look to strengthen. However, there's a good chance they'll lose Yves Bissouma this summer, who everybody wants. Like, he is one of the hottest young midfielders. That will be spoken about on Sky Sports News every single day this summer. So maybe a hole actually opens up in the midfield, and as a result, Jason Malumbi gets more bench time and gets more game time off the bench. But he's kind of stagnated this season, Jason Malumbi. So it's another big year for him. And then we get to Aaron Connolly, who scored 2 goals this season, hasn't played a lot of football. He is back in the squad. He came on against Sheffield United a few weeks ago. He hasn't been used since then. We were obviously at Graham Potter's press conference virtually a couple of weeks ago, and his theme around Aaron Connolly is that he is quite often very hard on himself off the pitch, and it is trying to find that winning mentality and that mentality to fight for his place off the pitch, which is required before he actually gets more minutes and before he starts scoring goals again. Like, this year, Brighton did strengthen in that area. They brought Danny Welbeck in. It was only a 1-year deal, so he could be gone at the end of this year. And Aaron Connolly went down the pecking order 1 spot. So does Welbeck leave? Does he go back up 1 spot? Again, I'm not sure. I think that Brighton probably see that they need to strengthen in that department. He's 21 years of age at this point. The question I would ask is, could he score 15 goals in a championship season? And I think he probably could. I think that, again, he's in a similar situation to Shane Duffy and to Jason Malumbi, that a championship loan move may actually be the best avenue for him next season. So in a strange way, the 3 main Irish players that we've been keeping an eye on at Brighton and Hove Albion over the last few seasons are all in a similar place this summer.
Yeah, not a great scenario for Stephen Kenny. We'll do more of these a little bit later on, and we'll run through the rest of them for the rest of the week. If you've got any of the particular situations you'd like us to talk about, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Gerard's office rocker and Coleman, there's no sense in leaving Everton, says Timmy. Thanks, Timmy. Sometimes you've got to be off your rocker to see the truth that's staring you right in front of the face. I just think there's a chance to make a lot of money for one of the good teams if he had Mino Raiola in charge of his career at this point, he'd get a move to one of those teams, and when he gets there, he'd get in the team, I think, and he'd play loads.
Seamus Coleman would not appoint Mino Raiola as his agent. Have you heard him speak? This is the most no-nonsense man. He doesn't do Mino Raiola. He doesn't do nonsense. The commentaries at Arsenal would absolutely take Seamus Coleman, no questions asked.
Big clubs we're looking for.
But Coleman would not go to.
We're obviously looking for a big club. 7:56 this morning. Now, as well as being one of the top coaches in the country, Dublin LGFA manager Mick Bohan is also a green space professional agent for Husqvarna. No one has a better understanding of what equipment schools and clubs need when maintaining their grounds, from the lawns and pitches to pathways and hedges. As a commercial agent for Husqvarna, specifically for Dublin schools and clubs, Mick can outline the perfect Husqvarna solution for your specific green space needs, thinking automower, battery handheld products or cleaner alkalite fuel. Log on to husqvarna.ie for more details. Owen caught up with Mick yesterday for a chat ahead of the new season. The full version will go on the OTB Sports app. You can get it, just subscribe to the OTB GAA feed on our podcast network. Renowned as a skills coach, has he had to work on the other side of coaching, managing people?
This group have probably opened my eyes to that, and probably, as you get older in years and even watch your own kids grow up, you learn a lot more about the other side of life, because even trying to distinguish that for a player between your identity as a footballer not being your true identity. If you have a bad game, doesn't mean that you're a bad person, or if you don't make the cut on a county squad, that doesn't define you as an individual. And trying to actually say, make people aware of that, that's not something that I would have been probably hugely aware of over the years, but certainly now, I mean, even this time of year, like obviously it's a little bit different at the moment because we're not in a position to run trials and that type of stuff, but we did call in a few players that people had made us aware of to try and see if they could develop over this lead into the National League. But we never cut our squad last year, which is something we always do. But just with the climate, I just didn't think it was the right thing to do. It certainly wasn't a humane thing to do, because we weren't aware of everyone's journey. Like, some people struggled, other people needed the group environment to be in a good place. So we carried essentially 38 or 39 players, which was a large squad. We wouldn't normally do that, and it's difficult to do it. And it's very difficult to keep that number of players content. But because of the pandemic and access to going training, which obviously was something that we were massively appreciative of, because a lot of people didn't have those opportunities, it was an outlet for the group. And so, without trying to make ourselves out to be Padre Pio or something like that, we genuinely were doing a service to our community or to our city by facilitating that. But I think the group really appreciated it, and it's not I look now, in a couple of weeks' time, and we have to cut the numbers down a bit just to make sure that it's operable. But it's an awfully tough time, because it's not just, you're not just telling somebody that they're not with you, you're telling their family and their friends and the hopes that are built up around it. And that's definitely something that I've become way more aware of as a coach.
Yeah, I hadn't even really considered that last year, that essentially somebody who doesn't make an inter-county squad for a huge part of this pandemic, telling them that they're not part of the squad kind of takes away their avenue to sport, full stop.
Completely. And it wasn't in normal circumstances, you go back to your club or whatever. This was end of nothing. So their outlet was gone. So genuinely, on a humane front, it was the wrong thing to do, even though from a point of view of logistics and finance and all the things that are involved in the thing, it wasn't the right thing to do. But look, I think they got rewarded, and I genuinely would feel that they appreciated what took place.
When you mentioned there a few moments ago about the identity of a footballer versus the identity of the individual in your squad, how hard is that to actually live in reality? Because everybody involved in sports teams bloody care about the outcome of what is happening. They care about winning and losing at the weekend. How do you manage to create that separation?
Well, it's funny. First part to that answer to that question is it's terribly difficult, right? But I'll give you a conversation I had with a player during the summer. I told her, as a daughter, I'd love her, but as a footballer, she drives me insane. And that's the separation, genuinely. You can have a really, really, really good person who you could be terribly fond of, but just because they don't make the cut or don't make the team, that doesn't mean that as a person you don't value them. And you're trying to get them to see that. And ultimately, I certainly spent an awful lot of my younger years been defined by football, feeling that I had to prove myself, you know, either as a player or as a coach, for people to accept me in a certain way. And now, and I don't know, sometimes when you've been part of successful outfits, it might be very easy to say this. Now it doesn't bother me. I actually, you know, even from a point of view of judgment, like I remember when I got back involved with the girls in 2017, and I picked up a paper, and the statement on it was Mick Bohan's second stint involved after failing to land the All-Ireland in 2003. And I remember thinking, isn't that incredible? In 2003, we were beaten by a Mayo team that were arguably better than us in an All-Ireland final. So does that mean you're actually a failure because you lose? Or how do we judge people? And I give a lot of coaching courses around the country to clubs and development squads. And I consistently tell people that you should not be judged on winning or losing, but you should be judged on what you achieve out of the group that you have. And sometimes you do not have a group who are capable of winning the competition. But that does not mean you're a failure, nor does it mean that they're failures. So all of those things is all you can do is consistently repeat those messages. And I've got to a stage in my coaching career, and I say this definitely based on the fact that it is easier when you've been successful. Like, I mean, even small things, which is quite interesting. Obviously, I'm involved with a women's team at the moment, but I don't see them as a girls' team or a women's team. I genuinely see them as a football team. I couldn't care whether they're girls or boys. I've 3 girls and a boy myself, so that doesn't bother me. I actually just see that I'm going out to coach a game. But I'd bat for them. I'd fight for them the exact same way as if they were a fellas team. And that includes standards around the country. When I go into a grounds and somebody thinks it's okay that you could be delayed by 20 minutes, or you don't have access to 2 changing rooms, you know, where a lads team would have, I don't accept that. Not because I'm fighting the cause for girls football, but because there's a standard that we should be adhered to all of the time, regardless whether it's male or female. And indirectly, then you're obviously raising the standard for your group. So I'd approach the whole identity between a player and a human being in the same way. It's not that I just say it. That's actually part of me now. So I live it out, and you know, I try and constantly pass on those messages, and you know, it's eventually will rub off on people then, I think.
Do you have that headline about 2003 pinned up on the wall somewhere at home?
There's a bit of a dog in me. It's back here in the memory bank. There's lots of lessons that are certainly implanted at this stage.
Mick, could I just ask, like, this is fairly open in terms of all the different parts of you as a coach, and maybe even as a human as well. How do you generate fresh ideas? How do you constantly keep either what you're giving to the team, what you're giving to yourself, fresh and new on a constant basis? I'm not sure, is it reading, is it listening? Is there anything you do that keeps your ideas fresh?
there's a couple of factors in that. First of all, you would be amazed the amount of people around the country who would make contact, send books, send coaching courses, send video clips of stuff they tried out and whatever else, because they're, you know, I've never put out anything on YouTube, but there's a lot of coaching courses that I've done up on YouTube that people have videos. So people then share, because they're, and I love that idea anyway. It's John Morrison, who I would have been very, very friendly with. That was his ethos, that you share your ideas, right? So that's something that has actually started to happen since I got involved with inter-county teams. But the most important factor, I had a conversation with somebody last week who's essentially starting their journey, and they made contact through LinkedIn, and they were amazed that I had responded, and I was making the point, why wouldn't I? Just because you don't have a name, or you're not a name at this point in time, how do you think the rest of us learned? Like, I started off, I coached with Jerry McCall. He was one of the first managers I worked under the development squads. I worked with Niall Moyna and Sean Boylan and Sigerson teams. I've obviously worked with Jim Gavin. Like, you go down through the learnings. John Morrison, who was a mentor for me for so many years, the learnings of these people was just substantial. But the key factor that I've picked up over the years is having quality people around you. And I've got, every year I've mixed it up with coaches. I mean, I've a fabulous coaching staff beside me, but we've used people from basketball, we've used people from rugby, we've used people from Gaelic games, we've gone to the group themselves. So that learning, trying to constantly just, I mean, oftentimes it's the same message, but you're genuinely trying to freshen it up, or it's extending the play, or making it better, like even though you thought you'd cracked, that there was actually weaknesses to it, and those challenges. So that freshens it up. And equally, when we started off, we were telling the players what to do all of the time. Now we're initiating an idea, but then they're the noise, they're the discussion point around it. They're the ones who are picking holes with it, whether it's right or wrong, or what they see works off it or doesn't. So all of that changes the environment constantly, which obviously makes it fresh.
Right. Is LinkedIn like a hothouse for coaches at the moment in terms of discussion?
Well, I think the pandemic was a hothouse for coaches. Like, I mean, there was some, now I'm not a fan of Zoom calls, and I mean, even I did a couple of online things for different counties over it, and I hate that lack of interpersonal contact, because that's what gives me my buzz as a coach. But certainly LinkedIn it has made people accessible to you that you may not have thought were accessible before. But my experience in coaching has always been the top people give you their time. That has definitely been my experience.
Yeah, and I've seen as well, not that you blow your own trumpet here or anything, but that since people have come back training, I've seen on social media, you've been out coaching different kids around the county. I'm not sure, is that a long list of people who try and get in touch with you on LinkedIn, and you've got a list as long as your arm almost of different seminars you need to get to around the county? But I presume you're a man in relatively high demand.
But it's brilliant. Like, I mean, 2 years ago, a guy, and I won't name the county because it'll be wrong, but in the East Coast, a guy who was involved in an under-13 girls final got in touch with me, and he wanted me to come down to give the pre-match speech for the final that they were in on the Saturday. I was there trying to tell him that my pre-match would have nothing other than a disastrous effect in the squad, right? That it was a situation whereby, so we put and I didn't want him to feel that we were dismissing him, but like, I was trying to let him understand that, honestly, if you got in Jose Mourinho, it wouldn't make a difference, right? That your message is key. So you're the one that they've entrusted themselves upon. So those words from you at that stage. And so he asked, well, what should I say? And I said, well, I'll give you something that we came up with on our second year with the group that they love hearing, and we still use it to this day. And the whole of the first year, I would have hit the girls on their standards weren't high enough. They're not executing the skills to the level they should be. If you want people to come and watch you play, then you must get the standards to a higher level. And our second year, by the time we got to championship, we came up with a phrase where we said, we can't wait to watch you play. And they saw that as the biggest compliment that they have been given off us. So I said it to him, tell your team you can't wait to watch them play.
So it's a transportation from the why would people come to watch you play to I can't wait to watch you play, and that's a journey you go on then.
And that exactly was it. So we couldn't wait to watch them play because we were proud of the stage that they had got to. So that was recognition.
It's remarkable because I remember we had a chat about 14 months ago on the show, Mick, and you were talking kind of along that theme about the 2019 final and how you were a little bit disappointed about the final in 2019 because it wasn't a great spectacle. And maybe in 2020 things could be different. So at this juncture, had people been allowed to come to the stadium last December, do you think they would have been more enthused with the product they got in the final last year? Or have your concerns kind of been allayed over the course of the last 12 months?
So it was a decent enough final, but it still didn't get to the level that I would have hoped that we could get to. Certainly from a point of view of a spectacle, and obviously people weren't there and there may have not been the same view. The Donegal game was a ferocious battle. And essentially after 4.5 weeks of preparation, we couldn't get over the intensity that the game got to. The pitch of the battle was serious that day. And equally the Armagh game, it really hit a high note. So you feel that, like when you're in the arena, you feel it. It's not something you look back on afterwards and you go, but ultimately, we had 5 championship games. No league games, obviously league in February and March until they got bulled. But so we went from nothing. We actually had 2 challenge games into a championship season. And it's very difficult to reach the levels that you're capable of. And that's for everybody, not obviously for us. So 19 was a disappointment. Yeah, that one will still sit in the craw. And, I suppose isn't a lovely thing to be able to win a competition and still be disappointed with the performance that you give. But genuinely, and I suppose this is probably success in a coaching department, but genuinely, we are judging our games now on the level of performance they give on a constant basis, whether it's an in-house game, whether it's a training session. And obviously, the outcome is important. But and it's very easy to cliche this whole thing and say, the whole thing of, on consistency, and we judge it on a barometer of, you do and you don't, because ultimately passion and heart and grit and all of those things, as I keep telling our S&C coach, there still hasn't been a machine made to measure any of that stuff. But I just feel this group, they still haven't hit the notes they're capable of. And that's, maybe we never will, but it's certainly something we're searching for.
OTB AM.
Yeah, really, really interesting stuff there from Mick Bohan. Always great to hear the thoughts of one of the most successful coaches working in Irish sport at the moment. A reminder, of course, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Mick Bohan was speaking with Owen there, thanks to Husqvarna. The full 30-minute chat will be available to listen to shortly on the OTB Sports app, and you can get it by subscribing to the OTB GAA feed on our podcast network. Now, what are we at? 8:14, and this is OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show, brought to you by Gillette. We're going to be hearing from the Kildare Hurling manager, David Herity, in the next few minutes. We're talking about the Dubs with Conor McKeon a little bit later on, and we'll bring you the first episode of our Football Icons series. Got to stay tuned for that. Back after these with the sports pages.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Dad Pod.
This is a video thing as well.
Have a name.
Podcast. Midlife crisis.
Paddy Daddy.
Midlife crisis.
Dadcast.
That's not bad, actually, yeah.
There was definitely a period of a couple of months where meltdowns were becoming more frequent, and now when she's outside and she's sort of playing with the neighbours' kids, like if she doesn't get her own way, the meltdown is quite extreme. So maybe that's the terrible twos, but I think maybe we've escaped the worst of it.
Well, I think the terrible twos is a bit of a misnomer because it goes into the 3s and 4s.
Dadcast, Tuesdays from 3 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in on the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
At Online Tradesmen, we've never been busier. And if you're a trade professional, there's never been a better time to join us. Access over €17 million worth of jobs nationwide every month, along with e-learning and other supports. Need a website for your business? It's included in your membership. And on average, Online Tradesmen members get up to 10 times their fee back in new sales, marketing tools and savings. Apply today at onlinetradesmen.ie. Online Tradesmen, the home of qualified trade professionals.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
It's 16 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. Let's run you through very quickly the sports pages before we get to our next guest. Dublin footballers escape fine as Kerry manager Keane slams breaches. So that's the main story coming out today. Dundalk squad to be COVID tested as images emerge of night out. I mean, we need to talk about Dundalk a little bit later on. Let's make 2 minutes to talk about that because they're definitely one of the worst run sports franchises in Irish sport at the moment. Ex-Dub Philip Ryan named on tip panel as Sligo's Ewing bows out, and Keith Wood, why stunning James Ryan shouldn't let Lions snub change his game. So plenty to get your teeth stuck into this morning, and plenty going on in the sports pages as well. Just Edison Cavani, he is still a Manchester United player. He's signed for another year. 15 million quid apparently is what it cost Manchester United to get Cavani. That's on the back page of loads of those papers this morning. And Kingdom boss slams rival COVID breaches. So just adding a little bit of seasoning to what was a pretty bland start to the off-season. I think somebody's making the point in one of the papers today that if you thought the hurling was bad with the advantage rule, wait until you see what football is going to be like. The Mirror, Boris blocks Wembley way, so it now looks like the Champions League final might be in Portugal because UEFA want to bring 2,000 the Licadoos to the Champions League final, and the British authorities are saying no thanks. Portugal might be the last place that they end up in there, and then the All English final heading to Portugal is the London time, so that's kind of a sample of it. The end of there. Kerry boss angry with GAA's COVID rule breakers, and they also have a picture of Jonathan Sexton in training yesterday at UCD. So apparently he is nearing a return to action and ready and willing if the Lions decide to call him up for that. So it is 18 minutes past 8 here. I'm delighted to say David Herity, the Kildare hurling manager, former Kilkenny hurler, is with us this morning. David, good morning to you. How are you?
Good, Ger, and yourself?
Yeah, good. Look, we wanted to chat to you about the competition scenario that you guys find yourselves in with the Kildare hurlers at the moment, because I think one of the big successes of last year was the fact that the Joe McDonagh final was on All-Ireland final day. Loads of people tuned in. The game got analysed to death, as we've all now famously heard about by Don Logue on the day itself. But there was clearly a benefit for Kerry and Antrim being involved in a high-profile game like that, and we've seen Antrim roll on to this season. So the scenario this year isn't quite as promising for teams in your division in hurling. Is that fair?
Well, look, it's the Joe McDonagh final is still going to be on July 17th, which is the Leinster final day. So it's still going to get one of the major days in the year. So I think anyone who gets to the final that day won't care that it's on before Leinster final or an All-Ireland semi-final. Ideally, they'd love it if it was on the same weekend as an All-Ireland. But I think if they get into the final with a chance of going up into the Liam McCarthy, I think any team or any of the managements there would be happy enough.
It does mean, though, that there's a little bit less focus on the competition this year. And the fact that it's on earlier would suggest that there are fewer games. And I think maybe that's the problem, is it?
Now, that's one disappointment, all right. Yeah, like, you know, there's 2 groups of 3. You get 2 games over the space of 13 days. And, you know, for some of the teams, they'll have 2 games within 7 days, and that's it, and that's pretty much the competition over. So that, I suppose, that element of it is extremely disappointing. Like, everything is very much crammed in. Like, Joe McDonough, on a normal year, you get 5 games, you get a chance then to really experience, especially from ourselves being promoted, to get a great run out against 5 other teams and see where you're at the end of the campaign. It is a little bit shotgun, all right, in that scenario, that you finish up your league, 13 days later you're out against Carlow. Again, we're lucky enough we have a week off, and then we play Westmeath, so it is very, very quick of a run off that way. And yeah, for the amount of training that people have done, to have it out of the way that quickly is a little bit disappointing. Then again, if you look at the footballers, they have a once-off match, so I'm sure some of them would love to have the 2 games. Again, in hurling, it could be the exact same if things don't go well in your Leinster or Munster campaign. So we can't have too many complaints. It's the same for everyone this year, and we understand, hopefully, then next year that everything will be back to normal. So you have to get up and get on with it.
Yeah, it does seem to be one of the only things that have changed, though, from last year, David. Like, I mean, the footballers, maybe they might not be overly happy with their championship structure, but at least it's the same as last year. When it comes to the Tier 1 hurling counties, it's the same as last year, but it just seems that when it comes to outside of Liam McCarthy and hurling, that seems to be the only thing that the GAA have actually shortened and condensed.
Yeah, it has, and I suppose if you were to raise these questions anywhere, they'll just tell you that they can't fit you in anywhere else in the calendar, that they're completely booked up. So you can spend all your time getting focused in on the lack of promotion, or go down an avenue like that, or else you just concentrate on what you're doing and realise that instead of having 5 games to try and get to a final, you have 2, and focus on the positives, and you just try and get on with it that way.
Because Fintan O'Connor, the Kerry manager, came out a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure did you see his comments, and wasn't best pleased, I think it's fair to say. He was saying that everyone's discussing what we can do to help counties bridge the gap between Tier 1 and Tier 2. But in hurling, there is a Super League, and the other counties are kind of left behind. We definitely have a Super League in hurling, and it's definitely at the expense of counties like Kerry that don't get to play as much at that level. Now, he's probably doubly frustrated, considering had things gone differently against Antrim last year, they might be playing Liam McCarthy hurling. And I know from your perspective, it's been very much on the upward trajectory since last year. But is there that sense that prevails in hurling at times, that maybe there's not enough to actually try and make an effort to close that gap?
Well, like if we look at our Christy Ring campaign there last year, when the new competition structure came out, we were told we're playing Offaly in a once-off game, and the loser that is out, and that's it. And only for, I suppose, we kicked up a small bit of a fuss with it at the time, and kind of said that it's not on for lads that have trained for 9 months to get 1 game in October. Wasn't right. And then we got a backdoor system, and thankfully we had a very successful year anyway. Now, we came through the front door the way things came, and we ended up winning and getting promoted. But there was a chance there that competition with just 6 teams in it was just going to be run off in a once-off game, a quarter-final, semi-final and final, and be gone in 3 weeks, which made absolutely no sense after all the work that was put in. So I think with some of these things that, now again, I didn't hear Fintan's comments, but sometimes if you don't say anything, all of a sudden they kind of see it can be put across as, yeah, everything's okay here, and we'll go on as normal there, lads. So, we raised this fact last year. We got a back door, or the back door was introduced. Counties got themselves an extra few games, and then, got that extra bit of experience. This year it's disappointing, but again, if anyone turns around, if you were to say to anyone this year, well, if you win your 2 games, you have a final, so you have 3 games. So, they could say you have 3 games rather than 5 games. Considering that it's COVID and the year that's in it, it's not the worst case scenario.
I know you're saying that obviously you've got to put a positive spin on it, and that's you as a manager having to speak like that. I do wonder, in private conversations, and I'm not asking you to betray any confidences here, but you, Michael Fenley, even Darren Gleeson, there's a much higher profile of manager at your level at the moment who are building great careers at a level that maybe in the past we wouldn't have had All-Ireland winners who have been as successful as you guys being in the forefront and being able to speak knowledgeably about hurling at all levels. I do kind of... I guess what I'm trying to get to here is that do you feel a leadership role as well within the sport of hurling that is kind of separate to being the Kildare manager, or an opportunity at some point to try and reshape this in the future so that counties like Kerry, like Kildare, like Antrim aren't left behind?
Yeah, I think there are easy enough ways of trying to promote the counties at the lower levels as well. Like even the draw was made behind closed doors at some stage throughout that week, whereas the Leinster draw was made on live on RTE that morning. And I don't think it would have taken a whole lot extra time just to spend an extra 10 minutes doing out the draw and giving that bit of extra promotion rather than just being released in an email later on that day that we happened to just get at 5 o'clock. I think it was on a Wednesday. So there is a lot. There's just it can be extremely easy to try and give an extra bit of promotion to the counties at the lower levels. And again, then I think if you put that effort as sure that the second tier teams aren't as afraid that they'll just be left behind. Like I said there last year, there was a huge amount of discuss down with the Christie Ring teams when all of a sudden this was thrown out, and all of a sudden it was a case of you have one game and that's it. It's quarterfinal, semi-final and final. And behind the scenes, I was chatting away to the different managers. They probably won't want their names mentioned. We were probably the most vocal out of them all because I suppose the draw that we got was awfully, and it was just a simple case of just get up and get on with it. You have a chance, and I think if you lose, you'll have a relegation final. So there's your two matches. But things thankfully changed around that way. But it is a case, as I said, I didn't hear Fintan a couple of weeks ago. Sometimes as well, if you bark and you get what you want, which we did last year, and you tend to bark again, well then you just become a noise. So we left it off. We're happy enough to be up in Joe McDonagh this year and the way things are going, and we'll keep our kind of, I suppose, that is further down the way that the whole structure is this year. Like the 2B, it's you just have to focus in, and we have to focus in on the 2B league that will be starting from this weekend onwards. We can't get into that scenario where we're focusing on Joe McDonagh because you're getting sidetracked. The likes of Kerry probably can because they'll have a comfortable enough 2A campaign and then be able to head into their Joe McDonagh. So it's there's a lot of extra problems, I suppose, a lot of pressures already on teams rather than focusing in on things you probably won't be able to change.
People are going to point to Antrim's victory against Clare at the weekend and go, oh, the system works. Look, you've got mobility from one lower tier to the higher tier and then they can live there. But I don't think we can all sit back and go, geez, hurling is perfect because Antrim beat Clare at the weekend.
No, it's not. And Antrim, I think anyone that has been following Antrim knows the huge work Darren Gleeson is doing up there. And, you're not at all surprised. I know last year they got... I thought wrongly they got slated on they probably had their worst performance today in Croke Park in the Joe McDonagh final, and yes, got slated afterwards. They're doing phenomenal work up there, and anyone who has played them in challenge matches will know that they are kind of a step ahead and they are bridging that gap. And I'd expect them to pick up another couple of results in the rest of the 1B campaign. I think Darren is doing a very good job. He's got full commitment in there, and I think a lot of the development counties, in order for them to bridge that gap, it's not just going to be a simple case of you have extra games, you need to get your house in order, and just on the Kildare point of view, like we have huge buy-in now from the club scene. In certain counties you'll probably find that, and you'll often hear that lads from a certain club aren't coming in and they're not making themselves available for the county team, so they're already down a few players. We're delighted that we've full access to the players from the clubs. They've been excellent in Kildare, but also then you have to have the development structures in place. Kildare have a minor team that's now competing at A level. They have an under-20 team that started back training last night for the first time ever, like as a proper team. Like they've been back since January doing their strength and conditioning program, but they'll actually have a proper training schedule going into the first A championship. And I think if you get those things right, well, then you can start bridging the gaps with some of these Liam McCarthy teams. But there's thrown in an extra 3 games and you don't have your proper structures or proper commitment from the clubs, you're at nothing there.
There's always been the sense, David, that Kildare is a little bit of a sleeping giant at the moment when it comes to football, at least, just because of the population and, I guess, past glories. Are you finding the same thing in hurling at the moment, that there is a lot of untapped potential in the county?
There are, yeah. But the work that Owen Stapleton and then Pat English now with the under-20s are putting it on at underage. Like I said, look, if you look back to Kilkenny and why everyone talks about it, they had a conveyor belt coming through for years from minor to under-21 success, and that was leading into the senior success. You need that in any of the counties, and I know that likes of Down, Antrim, Derry, some of the development counties there that are coming through. Like if you look at Offaly, Westmeath, why they are or have the potential to bridge those gaps is because they have under 21 teams or under 20 teams. So you just have to make sure that you get that in place first of all. You have to, because otherwise you have minors coming from 17, 18 years of age. They've done no strength and conditioning then for those 3 years, and then all of a sudden they're thrown into a senior squad and they're underdeveloped. And you can see then when they go out against those Lee McCarthy teams that they're just completely blown away. So, you know, things that I believe Kildare has a massive opportunity. I think this year is even, I said it to lads last year at the end of it, I think it's on a kind of a cliff edge. If we get full commitment again this year, I think there's massive potential to try and get promotion again in 2B, which is a massive aim for us. And then again, try and bring things on at Joe McDonagh. And I think with the clubs that are there, with the hurling community that's there, it's small, but it's a powerful hurling community in Kildare. I think wonderful things can happen over the next few years, especially with that structure that's coming through.
Can I ask you about the rule changes then, just David, to finish up here? What did you make watching the games last weekend, particularly about the advantage rule?
I thought it was shocking. I can't get my head around it. We had a referee in last Friday for an in-house game, and as he was explaining it, I think everyone had a fair idea what was happening for the goal, you know, for the penalties, and understood the rules. But coming out of the fence where it's just blowing up the way it is, I still can't get my head around how that's of any advantage to slow things up. It's all it is going to slow up the game. If you're playing against a stronger team, you're going to bring your forward out from full forward back to maybe 40 yards out from his old goal line, and you're just going to you could spend a minute and a half there trying to stand over a free and then back in again. It's going to slow up the game hugely. I maybe if there was, I don't see why that rule was changed. I understand the whole drag down heading in for goal makes perfect sense. It's stopping goal opportunities, especially if you're behind and you're being dragged to the ground. But coming out of the fence, it's I think it's going to kill the game. I haven't heard one positive comment about the whole thing. And even talking to the ref that we were talking about, he couldn't honestly understand why it was put in place. But that's it. They'll obey the rules. They'll do what they're doing. I'm sure some teams will find a loophole in it and try and be able to work quicker passage of play or try and get that ball going as quick as they possibly can. But it makes no sense in hurling to have a rule like that to slow up the play. It was a perfect rule. Sort out the penalty situation, brilliant, but you know, leave the backs alone to work themselves out.
It kind of invites some cynicism where you stand over the type of shithousery you see from like good Spanish football teams or Jose Mourinho's Porto, for example. You stand over a free and all of a sudden it's like, well, you just scored that, but you're going to miss this one. Like, not a great spectacle. No, it's going to... I think it's going to put a huge amount of pressure on referees, even there on Sunday. You know, that you're nearly getting into the VAR situation there where you're like, yeah, he was dragged back, but there was still 3 defenders there. You know, that's just up front the side of things. Like, it's going to cause a lot of confusion. It all comes down to the ref on the day. It's going to be extremely interesting. I can see a lot of management getting sent to the line as well, venting their frustration. And that's one of the things that is coming up. That it's obviously, if you give out to the referee now, it's a yellow card. If you get a second one, or say anything, it's a red card up into the stand. But coming out of the fence, if you have a chance of a lad, he's just outside, and at the end of the game, you know, you want that quick ball going in. It's killing the momentum of it. I can see it. There is that potential. There's a 2-week gap in between the league and the championship. I don't know if there's such a backlash there that they might review it again. But because everything is coming so quick and fast, and that's with everything, with injuries. If you pick up an injury, you've nearly missed half your campaign. It's going to be difficult for them to change a rule halfway through in that 14-day between league and championship. Yeah, no, it definitely will be. And look, maybe it comes in now and we never have to deal with it again because the reaction has been so negative from the get-go that it'll get thrown out as soon as it possibly can do. One last thing then, David, you mentioned about you bark once and you get changed. If you bark a second time, you get a reputation. Like, is there a window for you guys and your generation to actually be more centrally involved and shape the future in a more meaningful way that doesn't just sound like it's complaining, that actually people will listen to you and Mick Fenley and Gleeson because of the profile that you guys have, that there is an opportunity for you to get in and shape what the future looks like? Yeah, look, there is a possibility about that. There's
I think, and the big thing, what we were kind of met with a lot last year when we were trying to complain about the fact that there could have been just a once-off game in the Christie Ring, was just the fact that it's unusual times and it's uncertain times and it's COVID. So I think this year, no matter what happens at the end of this year, it'll be put off. Everything will be put down to COVID. I think in 2022, there's a chance of a clean slate when the actual fixtures are brought out, or when you'd hope they sit down to sort out these fixtures at the start of the year, that there, a bit of common sense is used, and that there is someone in there from the development counties to be able to kind of kick up a fuss rather than just accepting what's going on. One management won't do it. It does need to come from a collective group and try and get the management together at that level to try and kick up some bit of a fuss, whether it's at Christie Ring or Joe McDonagh, and try and actually say, we want at least 5 weeks if this is to be taken serious, and get together that way. And then maybe, rather than just having once off, managers coming out and saying something and then it's just brushed under the carpet because something else has come up. It does need to get the managements together and try and demand something higher profile games, more games, to try and give these teams a chance to actually bridge that gap.
Yeah, and the point you made earlier on about all the clubs rowing in, like it probably, for people from power counties from the Super League, don't really understand that, because everybody always wants to play for those counties, because that's the whole point of playing in the first place for many people who reach that level. But actually the split season is going to work really well for counties like Kildare and Laois, for example, where you'll have a season, everybody will play their club season hopefully well, everybody will know who the best hurlers in the county are, and then there'll be nothing for them to do except play for their counties.
Yeah, it has been brilliant, even going back, looking for, again, a few years ago where we were at, we were struggling to make a panel, but now, unfortunately, there on Saturday I had to ask 11 lads not to go forward with us into the 35. Like the amount of players that are there available now at the moment, because of the split season, it's a far more attractive offer when you're going to a lad who might now, I suppose, played for the last couple of years with the county team, but now you're inviting them back in again and saying, look, it's a 5-month gig basically, and you still get a chance. They are extremely passionate about their clubs in Kildare. There's a huge rivalry within it, and that is one of the things, I suppose, the initial 2 years where we kind of met a little bit of resistance was the fact that lads said, I want to play with my club, I want to win the county title with my club. And now that has the split season, it has been brilliant to be able to go up to a player, and we would have spoken before, anyone I've asked to come in onto the panel this year has all said yes. So it just shows that there is a huge shift, and I think that could be a massive boost in for any development counties. Like you say, anyone in Lee McCarthy will already have the best players, but definitely in the development counties you see better players coming in the whole time, and the standard is raising. It's just a matter of trying to, obviously, like I said, put the structures in place that is continuing all the way through. All
right, David, good stuff. Best of luck this weekend against Donegal too. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Ger.
David Herity, always good to talk to him and get his views on that. It sounds like maybe the tide is turning a little bit on.
Yeah, I definitely think last year was a really positive moment for non-top tier counties, the All-Ireland final day, having the Joe McDonagh Cup there. Even the fact that we are talking about Donal Óg's comments about Antrim this week shows that Antrim conversation was actually in the spotlight last year. Yes, it may be painted as a negative thing for some Antrim dyed-in-the-wool hurling fans, but it was great that there was controversy around the Joe McDonagh Cup final. It was because it was in the spotlight. It was because it was on All-Ireland final day. To be honest with you, I actually didn't necessarily buy this whole thing about All-Ireland football final day, for example, and the Tailteann Cup being a great shop window. I thought it might actually get overshadowed. I think last year that was disproven in the hurling, because the Joe McDonagh Cup final got a great audience and it got great conversation even on social media throughout and on the analysis that night.
I think as well the fact that the minor is no longer under 18, it's like, well, we can watch these kids play and put them under all that pressure, or actually we can watch the second tier competition have their day in the sun, and which of these is genuinely the right thing to do. No doubt the minor final will still be televised, but if it was on a Friday night, or if it was on a Saturday afternoon, and if it was on TG4, wouldn't that be the best thing?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think that the minor has clearly dropped the standard since it's gone to 17. Every year is so vital at that age. But I think that the GAA to not see what happened last December with the Joe McDonagh Cup and just to not copy and paste it this year, it is just such a strange thing to do. There may be reasons here that we're not sure of, but it worked. Very few things have actually gone well for people during COVID, but the Joe McDonagh Cup final is one of those things that worked. Why did they get rid of that on that day? And like, yes, it's on Leinster final day. It'll be in Croke Park. I presume if it's on Leinster final day, like that is good. That is positive. But it's even better if it's on All Ireland final day. So I just don't know why that was.
It's true, and those extra weeks that the teams play and train in summer, the difference between Leinster final and All Ireland final, like the team progresses so much more in those 3 or 4 weeks. The standard will go up again. So anyway, look, you hope that next year they get all the games they need and they get the investment that they require and they get the attention that they require as well. So that's that chat for you this morning at 40 minutes past 8, so 20 to 9. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, give me the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Kevin Cronin says, breach of rules is breach of rules, simple as that, but most of them are surely training on Zoom. Brian Kennedy says, talk about dodging a question, just say yes, Owen. Kevin Cronin says, you should be a politician, Owen.
Well, it's a complicated one. There's nuance to this. I actually don't know the answer to the question, so I couldn't just say yes.
You can just say yes or no.
I don't know is the honest answer.
John Duggan, good morning to you.
Ger and Owen, how are we doing?
Well, we're having a bit of a debate, John. We're
debate?
Yeah. So, as a football fan, you're a Dublin football fan and a Clare Hurling fan, right? That's your proper allegiances. I don't want to get this wrong at the start. But it's different for you because you're a Dublin football fan. And your team were training. When you saw your team were training, were you like, yeah, go get it, you go win the All-Ireland? No. Or were you like, lads?
Well, I was lads, because I don't think they need it. Dublin should be training a month later than everybody else.
Well, that's the thing. There should be handicaps.
They handicap the fields to make it a more level playing field. Like,
can we weigh them down in matches? Is that a good idea? Give them a few pounds of lead.
Maybe a 5-point lead. Once you win 5 in a row, you're completely sated for life, and nothing will ever need. You can just drop the mic, and that's what Dublin did. And they won 6. Okay, 6 is nice. 7. It'd be great if Kerry won, to be honest, this year.
Look at that. How do we reach this stage where you want your main rivals to win? That is like...
this is the moment. It is 8:41. And what date is this? The 11th of May 2021. And this is the day the GAA died. It's over. Come on, let's go home, everyone.
The Dubs want Kerry to win. That's the point that we've reached in this. How did it happen?
You know what? Kerry don't actually want to win it after hearing that.
Okay, another team, Galway, Kildare.
Yeah, I mean, look, anything would be a
even
break.
Yeah.
Well, Owen couldn't answer the question about whether or not he actually wanted. When he saw the Dubs training, he didn't know. In his tiny green and gold heart was like, "What do I want my team to be training, or do I not want them to be training?" It was like, "Oh no, I can't decide."
Yeah, I just can't. What's the right answer, John?
The right answer is that you wouldn't want them to be training. You wouldn't want Kerry to be in any way against the spirit of what the country wants, which was not to be engaged.
Which is the country wants Kerry to win the All Ireland, clearly.
Okay,
but they want to do it correctly.
Want to do it correctly within the rules and not cutting any corners, and not being up at 6 o'clock in Valentia Island where nobody can see it. There's no smartphones,
and it's always foggy.
And I'm engaging in cliches, but. You want to do things within the rules. And look, I think all this will be forgotten about. I don't think it's going to make a difference whether Dublin win or lose the All-Ireland. But it's funny that how many other counties that we don't know about were training, apart from Cork, Down, Monaghan and Dublin. So the Irish Independent reporting this morning that Dublin are not going to get any fines after the Gardaí investigation. They engaged in the process. I think that's worked in their favour. Director of Public Prosecutions also deciding no action will be taken against the organisers of that session at Innis Falls GA Club back in March, which saw Dessie Farrell get a 12-week ban. Elsewhere, Fulham out of the Premier League, relegated in their first season back up. 2-0 loss to Burnley last night, going down with West Brom and Sheffield United. Edinson Cavani back for another year at Man United, 14 million a year he's on. A 6 o'clock start at Old Trafford tonight for the game against Leicester. We won't see Harry Maguire or Johnny Evans, I think, tonight. They're both got injury issues. But Cavani in 15 goals a season. I think he's been great around the club and obviously a brilliant striker. But will he stay fit? That is the thing. And also there's a point to issues around the likes of Keane and Haaland and getting them to Old Trafford. 8:15 start for Southampton, Crystal Palace. Portugal set to be the country that will host the Champions League final on Saturday, May the 29th, either Porto or Lisbon. Complications around the pandemic means UEFA are set to move it from Istanbul, but not to London. Chelsea and Manchester City, issues around VIPs and that kind of thing. They wanted waivers for that. So Porto or Lisbon, where there are green issues around travel for English fans to go to Portugal. Nicholas Roach beginning today's fourth stage of the Giro d'Italia, 42 seconds off the lead. Filippo Ganna wearing the pink jersey. Dan Martin starting the stage a minute from the summit of general classification. Racing today at Killarney and Roscommon And Dustin Johnson, maybe a doubt now for the USPGA, Kiawah Island next week, after suffering knee discomfort that has ruled him out of this week's Byron Nelson Classic in Texas.
I just wanted to ask you a little bit about Rory. Pete Cowan's done an interview in The Telegraph today where he's talking about the level of scrutiny and pressure that Rory McIlroy is under, and he compares it to Tiger. He says that the first time he did a session with Rory, there was immediate analysis of what he had done, like it was some kind of magic quick fix that he was going to be able to come in and fix him after one session, including from some people he'd worked with before. So Pete Cowan works like some of these commentators in the media. They know his process, and they were like, "Wow, I can't really see it." Why isn't that fixed already? And he's like, "What the hell is this?" Comparing him to the same level of scrutiny that only Tiger Woods gets, and he says that's not fair because there's only one Tiger Woods. Probably something that the rest of us outside of the golf media and outside of McIlroy's orbit don't fully appreciate or understand.
Possibly. There's a lot of talk that McIlroy, you know, that beautiful draw that he hits off the tee, that's gone, and it's now a fade just to get himself in play. But that goes with the territory. If you're Rory McIlroy, if you've accrued all these riches in the game, both in terms of your talent bringing you major titles or becoming a very, very wealthy person, embrace it. Embrace the fact that you are one of the greatest golfers to have ever played and ever lived. But I don't think the scrutiny, from my observation, is anywhere near as hot as it was 6, 7, 8 years ago when he was winning those majors in quick succession, especially at Valhalla when he stared down Phil Mickelson and Ricky Fowler. 2 players are pretty much out of the game now because you've got Justin Thomas, you've got Dustin Johnson, you've got John Rahm, you've got all these young players coming up. Jordan Spieth, he's got the X Factor. Players like Victor Hovland, Colin Morikawa won a major last year. So I don't think the pressure obviously is always there with Rory around the Masters, but it's got to the stage where it becomes so long now since he won a major, 7 years, that yes, it does hype up a bit. And because I suppose people are so enamored by his talent that the conversation cranks up again. And obviously the media got so rich off Tiger Woods and corporate America got so rich off it that they'll always want a new storyline to have a very, very hot. But I think there's so many golfers in the game to give the storylines that I don't think Rory is under the same pressure that he might have been a few years ago.
It goes to a whole other level now, John, does it, when McIlroy hits a bit of form, if he hits a bit of form over the next little while? Like, I see what you're saying about all those other players who've clearly been better than Rory over the past 18 months in particular, but like none of them were picked to be in a commercial with Tiger Woods on their own over the last couple of years. Like there is no question that Rory McIlroy is on a level above all those other golfers, maybe not when it comes to achievements, but when it comes to profile and it comes to their fame and notoriety around the world.
I don't know if Conor Moore have anything to say about that, but yeah, no, I get what you're saying. But Brooks Koepka, I didn't even mention in that first tranche there, has won as many majors as Rory now. And I think when Rory starts winning majors again, then I definitely think he will be elevated to the status you're talking about. What I'm very interested in here is, I do think that Rory now is finally working with the best people, Pete Cowan and Bob Rotella. So Pete Cowan turned Henrik Stenson and Gary Woodland, with no disrespect to them, into major champions. He's worked with so many players like Danny Willett, Darren Clarke, and he's a gruff, no-nonsense Yorkshireman that works on the swing. And he also did a bit of consultancy with Rory about 15 years ago and Shane Lowry as well. So they do know each other. And I do think that's interesting. So I do think that he will help Rory with his swing and the few of the kinks that he needs to iron out. Actually, his driving wasn't great last week, but the rest of his play was fantastic. But the other thing, Bob Rotella had a huge impact in Harrington becoming a major champion, in Ian Baker-Finch and Nick Price and all these players down through the years. And he is pretty much seen as the guru, the main man when it comes to sports psychology. And what was fascinating when I was listening to Rory McIlroy's press conference yesterday, it was all about playing each hole one step at a time and then running out of holes and seeing where you are at the leaderboard. And where he was a shot ahead of Abraham Ancer. So I felt that in the stretch or in the heat of the hunt, Rory was able to execute to the point where he hasn't been doing that for the last 18 months. Yeah. And that was fascinating. And that is really interesting coming to Kiawah Island next week, where he won the major by 8 shots in 2012.
Yeah, so I suspect he might feature on Virtual Insanity this week. Am I wrong?
Next week.
Next week,
next week. Byron Nelson. Yeah, but yeah, I do think sometimes, I don't know if I feel like Rory McIlroy, but I've been overcomplicating my mind of Virtual Insanity and probably picking too many players.
You need a bit of Bob Rotella in your life.
Yeah, I need a Bob Rotella. I don't know if I can afford him, but I need him. And you just need to unclutter the mind. And Rory McIlroy is mental, and I think that actually has an impact then on things like his short game and his putting. So I think actually, what I was thinking about yesterday, 8-1, 10-1 could be an absolutely massive price on Rory McIlroy come 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. One last point on this, and you talked about his driving. Pete Cowan says, you can see from his driving stats there's plenty to do, and that potential for improvement should fill him full of self-belief. And then this nugget, McIlroy hit 19 fairways all week, the fewest of a PGA Tour winner in 33 years. That is mad.
It is mad, but he didn't miss them by far, though.
No, but it definitely, if the driving comes back.
Yeah.
Well, watch out.
The driving's been the strength of his whole life. We all know those drives. We all know them. We've seen them. I'm sure you've seen them down close and personal, Ger. Or whatever, pro-ams and that kind of thing. It should be hard for Rory because he's so naturally talented. The biggest thing got is natural talent. If you can put all the natural talent together, but if the mind is where he's been, I think, getting in the way of himself. But I think that seems to be coming together, and we'll watch out, world.
Right. John, good stuff. Thanks a million for that.
All right, lads.
John Duggan with us there, giving us his thoughts. We'll get virtual sanity later on in the week as well. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. It is 8:51. Across the next few months here on OTB AM, we'll be shining a spotlight on some of the most important characters in the world and history of football. This is episode 1 of Football Icons. There was no other place for us to start but the story of Gunnersaurus.
To separate football from an art form would be an unforgivable sin. It would be an injustice to those geniuses who see the ebb and flow of a football match as mere brushstrokes on the path to a masterpiece. Supporters as mere spectators on the journey to a higher plane of existence. Today, we bring you the story of a once-in-a-generation football genius, a once-in-a-lifetime football icon. This is the story of Gunnersaurus. Gunnersaurus has entered the fabric of our society and embedded himself in our day-to-day lives so well that it feels almost normal to have a green 7-foot-tall Tyrannosaurus Rex as our footballing equivalent of Buddha. But let me remind you that this is not normal. No, the Tyrannosaurus Rex is supposed to be 40 feet tall. So, how did such a tiny dinosaur come to be such a hero to so many? Well, let's bring you back to the Mesozoic era, the age of the dinosaurs, roughly 28 years ago when Jurassic Park came out. Now, as Jeff Goldblum was stalking around an island off the coast of Costa Rica, an 11-year-old Arsenal fan named Peter Lovell was creating a monster.
Arsenal very, very cleverly, I think, and very bravely hosted a competition to design their mascot.
This is Peter, no longer 11 years of age. You can call him Fathersaurus.
My passions at the time were Arsenal Football Club, Jurassic Park, and which was the big hit of that kind of that movie cycle summer. And all I could think about was dinosaurs and football. So I sat down at the kitchen table, and it just happened. It was one of those, honestly, like kind of eureka type moments that I can still vividly remember.
Down on paper went a portly yellow reptile wearing an Arsenal kit. The world was about to become introduced to Gunnersaurus Rex.
That my mum and dad saw it and like, that's brilliant. Hey, let's get the paper and put it down, and then I started writing out kind of the weird dimensions because I was always such a kind of almost OCD kind of engineering type person. I wanted to deconstruct and construct stuff. So that's where, when I read it now, I think to myself, oh my God, I can kind of remember talking about the tail balancing with the belly and all this kind of stuff.
Little did Fathersaurus know, but the tail would indeed balance with the belly. And Arsenal decided it was the mascot for them, and Gunnersaurus Rex became Gunnersaurus. But the 90s were a tough time to be an up-and-coming T-Rex. Dinosaurs were now cool. Theropods were in. In such a crowded market, you could be forgiven for asking, how on earth did Gunnersaurus manage to break through? Well, it turned out that the market did not matter. Gunnersaurus was simply better than all the other dinosaurs. Take his great foe, Rex, from Toy Story. He suffered terribly from the most awful of T-Rex afflictions, short arms. Gunnersaurus, though being a genetic freak, did not suffer from these issues. His long limbs allowed him to become proficient in hugging, a prerequisite for any promising dinosaurial cheerleader. Another of his rivals around this time was Barney, but as the 90s became the 2000s, the world woke up to the fact that while Gunnersaurus looked genuine and caring, Barney the dinosaur looked like a massive creep. And so started a glorious reign with Gunnersaurus as the world's #1 dinosaur and #1 mascot. You don't need to be an Arsenal fan to recognise how his absolutely massive head saved the club in key moments. How he stood for silence better than a mascot has ever done. And how he wrote himself into the annals of Arsenal history when he absolutely smashed Robin Hood in a penalty shootout to send him packing up the road to Nottingham. But most impressively, throughout this period of unbridled success, Gunnersaurus never forgot his roots.
When I got married a few years ago, it was arranged without me knowing that Gunner would turn up at my wedding, which was just an unbelievable kind of moment, a big unveil. It's like, what's going on here? And there was Gunnersaurus Rex with, a signed thank you letter from Arsene Wenger and stuff from the players, and it was, it totally just dominated the wedding. It's probably why we're not together anymore, because I think from the wedding it was like, oh my God. What was amazing about that moment was that was the moment that I met Jerry, and so that the gentleman, that we're not supposed to say, any kids listening, that was inside the dinosaur.
It was at this point that we had to cut Fathersaurus off. Now, rumours have dogged Gunnersaurus for the majority of his 27 years of existence. Rumours about there being, well, a man inside Gunnersaurus. These rumours have constantly been dispelled, and Arsenal have come out to clarify that Gunnersaurus was indeed hatched from an egg and has grown up from his beginnings as a baby. This is not to say that things are better this way. Maybe Gunnersaurus would be happier if he could be a dinosaur at work and a human being at home. That way he could communicate with us and we could communicate with him. Instead, he only communicates via hugs and Twitter. He is unable to speak. He is a prisoner in his own body. There is only so much a T-Rex can take before life gets too much, before a sadness develops in one's eyes. And in many ways, we should have seen the downfall of Gunnersaurus coming. Someone once said, the higher you rise, the faster you fall. This was particularly true for Gunnersaurus because he is a T-Rex and they have extraordinary bone density. First, there were accusations of vanity, of success going to the dinosaur's head. There were on-pitch celebrations. There were celebrations through the sunroofs of cars. Guys wanted to be him. Zebras wanted to be with him. There were the television appearances, and subsequently, he got in with the wrong crowd. He was connected to fraud when he began hanging around with Hammerhead, a suspect in the identity theft of Iron Man. It slowly then became substance abuse when he started to spend time with Buzz B and his sister Buzzette, two known pollen fiends. The larger his entourage grew, the more salacious the rumours of misdeeds became. Every week we saw Gunnersaurus posing beside a new troubled soul hiding behind the cheerful face of a mascot. Except of course for the Brazil mascot Canarinho, who everyone knows is just a miserable prick no matter what way you look at it. In the end, well, the demise was pretty predictable, but it didn't make it any less dramatic.
He's as much a part of match day as the players. Gunnersaurus has been a firm fixture at Arsenal for nearly 3 decades.
What about, we've got, of course, go to really big news today, huge news, the departure of Gunnersaurus.
Unbelievable. I mean, all them kids, all them junior gunners and everything like that, I mean, he's part of it now. I mean, there'll be 30-year-old people, 40-year-old fans who have grown up with that dinosaur, and yeah, disappointing. I think it's poor by Arsenal, I really do.
In the saddest day for dinosaurs for over 65 million years, Gunnersaurus was out of work and he had reached his lowest ebb. With news making headlines all around the world and clubs like Sevilla looking to bring the dinosaur to the south of Spain, Gunnersaurus went to ground. It was then up to Fathersaurus to look deep within himself to find out how to save his son.
Gunnersaurus Rex became front page news around the world, and everyone was talking about it, and obviously so my phone was going crazy, and requests were coming in from everywhere, and the TalkSport one, I think I said at midday, you know, like, oh, it's so annoying, you know, we got Ozil on the bench doing nothing, being paid enough money to pay this guy's salary over, you know, a week. He gets paid what the guy earns in 10 years. Like, just pick up the guy's salary. And then literally a few hours later on, Ozil made the announcement. Now, I'm not saying he listens to that, and I'm sure he completely made that decision himself.
Last piece of news. Yesterday, Gunnersaurus was pictured back at the Emirates Stadium. Gunnersaurus has returned. He is no longer extinct.
There's a text from Michael, and frankly, he's dead right. Joe, this is a disgrace. We are 20 minutes into a sports show. There has not been a single mention from Richie of the biggest sports story of the day. Gunnersaurus is staying at Arsenal. Great news from a Stegosaurus fan.
And it was those comments from Stegosaurus fans that put this whole thing into perspective. If late Cretaceous era fans and late Jurassic era fans could put their differences aside for just one moment, then think about what else we can achieve. Maybe Gunnersaurus could help us achieve world peace. Maybe Gunnersaurus could fix Arsenal's defence. And this is why Gunnersaurus is more than just a green T-Rex who suffers from dwarfism and likes to wear Masonic jewellery. He is much more than that. Gunnersaurus, he is a sporting legend. He is a football icon.
Wow, that was amazing. Owen, that's your best work. That was like, there were some absolute jaw-dropping moments in the middle of that. Gunnersaurus bringing world peace, but also overshadowing a wedding.
Yeah, that was certainly the part that I didn't expect to get out of this. I just wanted to pay tribute to my good mate, Gunnersaurus, to be quite honest with you. He's a dinosaur close to my own heart, to say the least. Just had to... to be honest with you, I procrastinated on that piece for months and months and months. I was like, I may as well get to it. I was going to do that after he was reinstated to the club by Mesut Ozil, and then I was like, you know what? Gonna watch The Sopranos, going to watch all the Premier League, but thankfully it got there. But that nugget about the wedding is quite extraordinary, I must say.
I'm sorry, like, we do this a lot, right? We set up a new series, a new season of stuff, and we do one episode, or we do 2 episodes, and we do 3 episodes, and then it falls flat on its face.
3 is generous.
It's okay, so we tend to do 1, and it's like, hey, well, this thing doesn't really fit in the general run and ebb and flow of the show. Let's call it a new series. And okay, great. That's our excuse for doing stuff. But you can't follow that. It's finished. It's over. Football Icons is dead. You know, I mean, I'm sorry. You're going to have to come up with a new title for anything that you want to do, because you've blown it all on the first one.
Yeah, that is the problem. There is episode 2, which is in the works at the moment, is hopefully going to be one on Mike Dean. I'm a massive Mike Dean fan. I'm sure a lot of people out there wouldn't be a fan of Mike Dean, but maybe we'll see. We'll see if we can get that one done by the start of 2023.
I was literally crying in the middle of that. It's 9:03 here this morning on OTB AM, and I have no idea how we can follow that. We're going to talk about the Dubs as contenders in just a little while. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Give me the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Martin Connolly says, this Gunnersaurus bit is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Keane O'Mahony says, wow. T. Smith says, what am I watching? Genius. Comedy genius from our own Sheahan there. Right. Loads of people disagree with me about Seamus Coleman. It's always about the money with Ger, says the text on Twitter. Sorry, somebody coming in saying this is typical. Money for Ger. We need more Colemans in the game. Club legends. Antrim Abu, says Joe Mason. It's not about money. It's about the respect where Everton are blowing smoke up his ass by saying you got a contract for life. Well, they haven't backed up the Brinks truck yet. They haven't actually paid him that contract for life. You look at what's going on with Cavani, for example. They got the deal done. They've given him 15 million quid. Now, I'm not saying Coleman needs to get 15 million quid from Everton because he's not going to get it. But, like, I just think that Coleman's going nowhere, says somebody else. If Phil Neville don't get sacked anytime soon at Miami, Coleman will end up there as his captain, but that's hopefully a few seasons down the line. You know, look, maybe that's the operation that he wants to associate himself with, and maybe they're the people that he's going to be involved with into the future with coaching or whatever. He'd only end up as cover at right back. Good for United, bad for Coleman. But maybe he's 3 or 4 seasons playing at a very high level and getting Champions League experience and getting to become a part of another club and that club's network of coaching opportunities and whatever's coming. Yeah, so that's the general consensus there, that I am talking pants.
Well, like the thing with everything is that, say if we bring this back to maybe the Tadhg Furlong contract yesterday, there is a sense that the IRFU maybe don't know in what sort of shape their coffers will be in a year's time when fans get back into the stadium, and whether or not they can offer Tadhg Furlong a bigger deal after the 1 year. Everton probably do know at this point what they can offer Seamus Coleman. We've seen reports recently of what the new television deal is going to be. It's going to be the same as the old deal. They probably know what their income is going to be. They've probably written off this season, and they know that they'll have a full Goodison Park probably from next season. That gives them probably a more accurate representation of what they can actually offer Seamus Coleman. So they probably need to get that contract done pretty soon, you'd imagine, because it is in their power to do so. And if Coleman's agent's not pushing for it, now might be the time, because he's playing really well and all the sounds from the management are really positive.
Yeah, it sounds, in fairness, the sounds from the management couldn't be more positive. We love this guy. He can stay as long as he wants. Hopefully, maybe that was deliberately so that the owners would cough up and the chief executive would be like less powerful in those negotiations, and he gets what he needs. Mickey Quinn, good morning to you, Mickey. How you doing? Says, great listen to Mike Bohan on OTB AM this morning. Seamus Coleman to Leeds would be a great option for all. The closet Leeds fans all happy to come out now that they're in the top 10. I'm only joking. I presume you've been long out as a Leeds fan. Mickey, OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Okay, so Alex Ferguson is on the back page of The Guardian because he's done an interview with Donald McRae. You've been having a look at this morning, Owen. Is there interesting new stuff in it?
Relatively speaking, like there's good stuff on his time at Rangers and the sectarianism that existed in that regard, being asked by somebody in the very upper echelons of Rangers about where he got married, for example, and having to say that he got married in a registry office rather than a church, which obviously was the case. But he feels sorry that he didn't stick up for his wife more, obviously, who is a Catholic, and Ferguson is a Protestant. And there was good detail in the interview about that. I know it's been reported elsewhere recently that sort of thread of his life. There's some other little parts in it, like talking about the early days at Manchester United and some of those struggles, and some of the people who had made their mind up about Alex Ferguson as Manchester United manager during those early struggles. Like he talks about the banner in 1989, 3 years of excuses and it's still crap, Tara, Fergie. He says, I'm sure that their training sessions were fine. I thought my interaction with the players was fine. The chairman was saying everything was okay. Bobby Charlton used to come down the trenches and say, don't worry, you'll be okay. I hadn't quite realised that Bobby Charlton was that hands-on at the moment, or at that point, I should say. There was a support system, but in print, some of the journalists were vicious, he said. There was this writer, a pain in the arse, who worked for the Sunday People. When we won the FA Cup in 1990, he said, you've proved you can win a cup, go back to Scotland. And he says, you shouldn't pay much attention to the media. Like some of them say, I'm a great genius, ignore that. The documentary looks like it's going to be really good. He's really happy with it. I think his son is really proud of what's being produced here, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I haven't seen it yet. It's out in UK cinemas actually from the 27th of May. I'm not sure is it going to be replicated over here once cinemas do reopen. I didn't realise it was a cinema release. So remember Amazon Prime as well, obviously. But
okay, remember Roy Keane talked about he always had Manchester United's best interest at heart. Give me a break. His son Darren got a league medal, very lucky. And then there was a couple of lads, was it a Preston or Peterborough, that we had on loan, and he got sacked. And what did Alex Ferguson do? Straight out. Was that what was best for the club? I'm paraphrasing here, but give me a break. Who's the director of the movie, Owen?
Well, it would be a son of Alex's. It would be Jason Ferguson.
Right. That's a brilliant coincidence. One's a football manager, one's a football player, and one is now a documentary maker. That's handy, isn't it? And the brother of the scout.
Yeah, and there's actually a bit on that at the start. I think that Jason was actually recording audio with his father from as far back as 2016.
Wow, so that's a good idea.
It is a very good idea. So he obviously was was almost approached, or he approached a company. But anyway, it was decided, it wasn't Jason's idea, it was decided that he would be the director of this movie.
Like, I mean, we knew watching The Last Dance that Michael Jordan was essentially one of the executive producers, and so therefore had a say over it. So this isn't going to get too in-depth into Alex Ferguson banning journalists and all of the other stuff that happened. The Rock of Gibraltar stuff, is that going to appear? How his vanity gave the club to ultimately the Glazers?
I would be astonished. There's also one paragraph here in the Donald McRae interview. A Ferguson interview is extremely rare and it comes with a stipulation. He will not answer questions about Manchester United today, about the Glazer family or Ed Woodward, or anything about the aborted European Super League, as he has already dismissed as a terrible misjudgment. So there are caveats, of course, to all these sorts of things.
Yeah, and at the same time, he's still one of the most compelling, interesting characters, and we'll all watch this documentary because that's exactly what happened with the Michael Jordan thing. The little micro allowances that we make, and you've got to make room in your brain for that, and you've got to make room for your brain for that when you watch a lot of sport these days, because how much can you actually believe? Here we are, 10 minutes past 9 this morning, asking what's the point of it all. 087 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. The point of it all is because we can create comedic genius like the Gunnersaurus Football Icons documentary. If you've missed it, don't worry, it will be all over our social today. I guarantee it. We're going to push this because it deserves an audience of millions, and I suspect that's what it's going to get. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. The best place to get it is all on the OTB Sports app. The Paddy Power Football Special live from 2 o'clock with 3 hours of quality lined up for you. Richard Dunn and David Myler from 2 o'clock. A very special Paddy Power half hour and crappy quiz. Tony Pulis, an in-depth interview live from 4 o'clock. And then tonight it's OTB Gold. Ronnie Delaney at 6, and then the show itself will be live from 7 p.m. Up next this morning on OTB AM, Conor McKeon joins us to talk about the Dubs. To keep an eye out in the ads here for the very latest episode of Up Close and Personal with Irish internationals Louise Quinn and Jenny Murphy.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
Ronnie Whelan could play, by the way. And let me tell you, they talk about people being dirty when you could tackle. He was filthy.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Dear me.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Is there certain players that have impacted you the most? Like that you're like, they've made they've really influenced you in a positive way in your career with just how you go about your business?
Yeah, so there would definitely be, so my friend Annika, or Bev as she was in Sweden, so she was just like the ultimate professional. She was the one who like got me in shape. She gave me a training program, she gave me an eating program, she kind of basically taught me how to kind of be a professional, and she was just my teammate. And then thankfully she was also a physio, so any little things that were going on, sometimes you go in, get her to give the hammies a little rub or just do whatever, off business. But she literally was just like kind of like, yeah, like your mother, your sister, and your best friend, like wrapped into one. And she was just a demon on the pitch as well. Like she actually wanted to apply for like Gladiator in Sweden at one stage. Like she was, I don't know what her like nickname would be in it, but yeah, no, she was just like the prime professional. Really like taught me so many things. And then playing with like Kim Little in Arsenal again, she's like, very, very quiet, but then when it comes on the pitch, she is like this like red mist comes over, and she's just like, she defends for the team, she attacks, she scores goals. Maybe things aren't going right, just give her the ball, she'll make something happen. And then I'll give you your little shout out as well. Like you've been through some of the tough times as well. You've had a couple of injuries that have really affected you and affected your career and all that. But I think when you came back, first of all, from like your long-term back injury, and then you did the ACL, but just how you've been able to overcome that and also kind of get on with life and do everything that is just like that special. And it shows like, yeah, maybe if I am having a bit of a crap time, like not understanding Swedish or Italian or, feeling annoyed or that I had a bad game, at least then, I would call you straight away and you'd be in your knee brace and you'd just give me the best advice ever. And then, so those little moments.
At Online Tradesmen, we've never been busier. And if you're a trade professional, there's never been a better time to join us. Access over €17 million worth of jobs nationwide every month, along with e-learning and other supports. Need a website for your business? It's included in your membership. And on average, Online Tradesmen members get up to 10 times their fee back in new sales, marketing tools and savings. Apply today at onlinetradesmen.ie. Online Tradesmen, the home of qualified trade professionals.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Yeah, OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. A couple of comments coming in about the other stuff that we've been talking about this morning. We'll get to those in just a couple of minutes' time. But in the meantime, we've got to do our contenders section. We've been going through most of the counties in the football championship, but it's time for us to turn our attention to less the contenders than more the defending champions. Conor McKeon, good morning to you. How are you?
Good, lads. Thanks for having me on after Gunnersaurus.
I mean, it's tough for any of us to follow that, to be honest. Kind of impossible.
Yeah.
But we'll do our best.
I've always thought that he simultaneously mastered the art of looking sort of solemn and ridiculous in those minute silences as well. So it's a very apt tribute.
We've been asking everybody the same questions to try and make this as fair as possible. And we start with the changes to last year, retirement additions, injuries, coaching changes. There's been some significant enough people missing from the Dublin panel this year from last year.
Yeah, well, the two retirees, Paddy Andrews and Michael Darmacali, are obviously two very big sort of personalities in the squad, but I think the writing was on the wall. I mean, Mick McCauley could have hung around to see if he could win a $9 Ireland medal this year, but it just wouldn't have been his style. Paul Mannion is obviously a big one, which is probably maybe people don't fully appreciate what a loss he'll be to Dublin, because he was in a position last year where he came off the bench and Dublin won the All-Ireland so easily. But I think, all things being equal, had Mannion been on the squad straight from the start when they reconvened last year, he would have been an automatic selection. And, I don't think Jack McCaffrey is going to come back this year anyway. So, they're definitely not at full strength, but obviously the big question is whether they can still, anybody can come up to the level of strength that they are at.
Can you just remind us what happened with Mannion last year? I forgot about that. I thought he had just almost moved it down on the pecking order 1 or 2 spot, so he actually just came back late to training. He was injured.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the story was. I think, I think it was something to do with a new job, or there was a possibility of going travelling, and he wasn't sure about coming back onto the squad. And I think, he might have just missed a couple of weeks training. And at that stage, Dessie Farrell was very, I think the same thing might have happened with Brian Howard. Again, he missed a very sort of inconsequential period of the league through injury and sort of never regained his spot back in the team, because, Dessie Farrell is one of these sort of very traditionalist managers in some ways, where if you're in the team and you're doing well, that's where you're going to stay. And I think, it was important for the development of Paddy Small that he wasn't just going to drop him for Mannion. But I think all things being equal, Mannion had won 3 All-Irelands in the 3 previous years. And I think, with his all-round game and his athleticism and his ability to defend, an extraordinary ability for a corner forward to defend. I still think he's probably in the top 3 or 4 inside forwards in the country. So no, he'll be a loss. He'll definitely be a loss. But again, it's when a team wins the All-Ireland as emphatically as Dublin does, and they don't lose any of their, I suppose if you want to call them starting players from the final last year, it's hard to make a case that they're sort of fatally wounded.
I totally understand that. I do think from reading Brogan's book and listening to the podcasts and just hearing everybody talk about the standards of training, that while MDMA might not have been in the team, certainly he was leading some of that stuff. Now, there's still enough of the old leaders who were there. It looks like Philly McMahon's going to be there. It looks like everybody else is essentially going to be there, as far as we know, from that generation, Kevin McManaman. There's enough of that crew who were there who remember what it's like to taste defeats, as opposed to just the new crew who come in and go, well, it's going to be like this forever. But at the same time, there's a lot of brain power gone, and there's a lot of standards being driven in training gone.
Yeah, well, that's the big thing I think that people don't fully appreciate. You know, in Bernard's book, there's a great passage in it where he's actually speaking to Paul Mannion. At this stage, like, Bernard is so far down the pecking order, he's kicking balls to himself up in the air when there's A and B's games going on. And, you know, he's taken Paul Mannion to one side and showing him a series of clips of Mannion's movement in match days and trying to actually sort of optimise his movement. And, yeah, you know, Kevin McManaman even doing a lot of the visualisation stuff the night before matches. Like, that's very, very unseen. And I think we probably fall into the trap with a team like Dublin, which is very clearly kind of powered by the individuals within it as opposed to by any manager. I think we fall into the trap of maybe appraising a player's value to the squad solely on what we see, what they do on the pitch. And there is an awful lot of things that go on behind the scenes. And, you know, like those players, there was a reason that Jim Gavin never kind of moved those players on towards the latter end of his tenure. It's because if those guys are willing to show up and, you know, do so fully understanding that they mightn't see any game time, that they might barely get off the bench for the year, they're invaluable because, you know, none of those players would be inclined to show up and mope. None of them would be inclined to show up and drag their heels. They still drive the standards on, and they still drive the young players on. So, yeah, like any sort of loss to that brigade, I think has to damage the squad on some level. But by the same token, you know, you look at players like Owen Murchan and Brian Howard now, who've been there for a couple of All-Irelands, and, you know, the 5 in a row probably doesn't mean a whole pile to them because they were only there for 2 or 3 of them. You know, and they're kind of driving the thing on now at a different level. And meanwhile, you know, you have the likes of Brian Fenton and Conor O'Callaghan and Kieran Kilkenny, who basically sort of inherited those roles as the leaders in the team. So, like, I mean, they're in a very good place when you look at it like that. And as well as that, the lockdown, like 2 years in a row, they've had massive breaks before they've had to go back training. Like, that was the one thing, the one factor that has worked against All-Ireland champions in the past is, you know, going late into the year, having to go back to your club, rushing into the league and never really catching your breath. And, you know, obviously Dublin, I'm sure the players wouldn't tell you that, you know, the big break has been in any way beneficial, but, you know, physically and even from a kind of a psychological point of view, that rest has to be invaluable for them.
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought about that as much in this context, but it makes perfect sense as well that there's a freshness then when they do get to go back training, that actually this isn't just a pain in the ass that you've got to go back and do the stuff that you were doing. In those terms, can the team get better than it was last year?
I think they probably can, Ger. Like, you have to remember, like, I wouldn't say that the team last year was in any way a patchwork job, because I thought Daisy Farrell did a great job last year getting that team to look so efficient, given the he had a very small window to actually work with the team as a collective. Now, he would have worked with a lot of the players prior to that, but his window for experimentation, you know, like even the stuff that was done in the league before the big lockdown break, that was basically redundant by the time they started again. So there was, you know, some work that basically had no value to him. So, you know, he had, but as regards sort of kicking on in terms of the team's evolution, like there's no way he could have gotten all the work done last year that he would have intended, because once the year started to go again in October or whatever it was, you know, it was bang bang. You played every week until you got to the All-Ireland final. So yeah, like I think they can improve. They absolutely can. And I know Desi is a manager who would be constantly pushing the boundaries as to, you know, how to set up a team, what's the most efficient way of playing this game. And I've no doubt that he had sort of big ideas for that last year that he probably had to shelve just because, you know, they had to get on with the business of defending the All-Ireland. And I think this year there's definitely a much bigger scope to do that. You know, we saw small things last year. You know, there were periods of matches when Dublin would play with 3 or 4 different guys in a full forward. Sometimes Brian Fenton was in there. They constantly rotated and asked different questions of an opposition backline. But it was very hard to see from the games they played last summer where that evolution is going to come from, purely because they came up against teams, you know, in the early rounds of the championship that they were just clearly superior to, that they were just going to beat regardless. And then after that, you know, when you got to Meath and Cavan and ultimately Mayo in the All-Ireland final, all those teams kind of set up in a fairly similar way against Dublin. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see what the other teams come at Dublin with this year. You know, I like a lot of people, I was fascinated to see what would have happened had Kerry played Dublin last year, just because, you know, it was very obvious that what Peter Keane was doing in some of the selections was based around tackling Dublin. So, you know, if they come up against a team this year that asks different questions on them, you know, I'm sure that Desi and Dublin will have answers to it. But what that is at the moment, it's hard to know.
Like, this may seem like a stupid question considering they won the All-Ireland so comfortably last year, but does this format suit Dublin? Like, would they have won the All-Ireland by a bigger margin had it been the old format? Like, is there a chance that actually if Donegal come through Ulster, or had they come through Ulster last year, they would have actually been fully primed and they would have been better placed to actually maybe push Dublin, that they're maybe Kerry, after coming through the tough Cork game, had they won on that occasion, would have actually been better primed to maybe take on Dublin, whereas Dublin in this format, as you say, are coming through Leinster and then boom, it's a semi-final, which may be against Mayo this year. It's a very, very tough game to go into after a Leinster championship.
Yeah, well, I think the format does suit them. There's no doubt about that, because, you know, there's a higher value now. If and when you win your province, you catapult further into the championship than you did before. So, you know, by definition, like, there was always the possibility of Dublin in previous years getting a difficult draw in an All-Ireland quarter-final. Now, it didn't really materialise, but that threat was there, you know. And similarly in the Super 8s, okay, they have an unblemished record in the Super 8s, but, you know, there was definitely a sort of confluence of different factors that you could end up in a group with Tyrone, Donegal and Kerry, for instance, and you might have to play two of them, you know. Like, what I'm saying is there's fewer variables now.
Yeah.
And I think we all expect Dublin to win Leinster. Like the degree to which they were better than Meath last year, it's very hard to see how any team could make up that separation in such a short period of time. So, like, we're back to kind of, you know, Mick O'Dwyer's Kerry team. Like, it's 2 games to win the All-Ireland, even if they won't look at it that way. You know, effectively, I think that's what it is.
It's exactly the same. That's the thing, and like, we really want to see them play. We want to see them play Tyrone, with Tyrone fully loaded, with McShane back from injury, and what that full forward line or forward line is going to look like with all of their superstar talent available. And we really want to see them play Kerry. And I mean, this year they're slated to play the winners of Connacht in the semi-final, so that obviously isn't going to happen this year. I mean, I do wonder, is it actually going to be next year before we properly see a full season of what Dessie Farrell's Dublin really look like, Conor?
Yeah, there's definitely an argument, you know, to say, you know, we tend to base our views on Dublin around those big victories that they have over teams in Leinster, and really we're not seeing much of them at all, because if there's anything that defines that Dublin team over the past decade, it's their ability to actually win games that they're in tight situations. But I suppose the issue is we very rarely see them in those tight situations, but, you know, invariably they find a way out of it. So, you know, like, that's why the Dublin-Mayo rivalry has appealed to people so much over the past 10 years, because Mayo were the one team that could put Dublin in awkward situations. Now, every single time as it happened, Dublin managed to work themselves out of that situation. But it's thrilling to watch, you know, when they're under pressure, that they come up with that. But I think the way teams played last year, they put them under no pressure. Like, every team effectively played with a +1 at the back, and everyone else marking on the pitch. And that just meant that Dublin could play with Robbie McDade as a free man at the back. And, you know, he was really the only, at the back end of the championship, he was really the new player at that level. And he was basically getting a free ride in terms of having to mark anybody. So, you know, like, they were ultra functional last year, you would have to say. And I do think it was a season, like, the pressure that was on Dessie Farrell to deliver last year was enormous, like, from himself, I would imagine, more than anybody else. Because who wants to be the guy that takes over the team that won 5 in a row and then doesn't win it the following year? But I think that he's been freed of that, I think, this year. And look, the other thing, I know people question, like, you know, like, what's the point in winning again and winning again? But, like, if you look at somebody like James McCarthy, who's, you know, 31 this year or whatever he is, and he's won more All-Ireland to get, and he has more than any footballer ever. And, like, there'd be an acceptance within the Dublin squad that, you know, if it goes away from them, if they don't win, there's no guarantees they're going to sort of win it back the following year. Like, it's certainly they'd be the last people on earth to make that presumption. So I think while they're on top, and they most clearly were very firmly on top last year, they'll be inclined to make as much hay as they possibly can.
Do you think they've killed everybody's spirit when it comes to the real contenders around the country?
Well, I hear that argument a lot, and if it is true, and I don't think it is, but if it is true, it doesn't say an awful lot for the players in those counties because, like I spoke to Paul Geaney a couple of weeks ago for an interview, and you could tell that he was mad to get back at it again. So, like, it might have killed supporter spirit because there's a sense of inevitability when they go out and play these games. But, like, I think for Kerry footballers and Tyrone footballers and Donegal footballers, Mayo footballers as well, like, you know, everybody wants to be the team who beats Dublin. You know, I'm sure they'll quickly afterwards move on and tell you, well, it's only a step towards winning an All-Ireland, but the prize is huge. You know, there's a reason why Tipperary's All-Ireland in 2010 was bigger than, you know, any other All-Ireland than they won. It's because they slayed the beast and they stopped the run, you know, and I think that applies to all those other teams there now. And I'd look, there are, you know, you can't play for Kerry without having a very high sense of confidence about yourself, and it seems to be the same for Mayo as well. And, you know, I think secretly they'll all sort of believe that they can beat Dublin, but you know, whether they do or they don't, like, it's very hard to predict. I think the league would be very interesting this year. I know there's an awful lot of talk about phony wars and, you know, there's very little value on it, but, like, I completely disagree with that. I know there's to be very little value on actually winning the competition, but managers have been, you know, racking their brains for the past 6 months about, you know, what they need to do with their team. This is their first opportunity to do it. And it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're Dublin, whether you're Kerry, whether you're the Limerick Hurlers. You know, if you go out and burn all your league matches and lose them all, it's very hard to turn it around that quickly, given how soon the championship starts after the league. So, yeah, like, we're still in lockdown. There's no supporters on the ground. There might not be a huge value in winning it, but I think as a series of kind of mini experiments, I think that the league started this week is going to be fascinating.
I've one last one. Peter Keane's comments, I think they're probably going to help the Dubs in one way, because it just makes them aware of the fact that there is this grievance being nursed by Kerry in particular.
Maybe, but I think, you know, Dublin have always sort of, in the past anyway, taken a collective sort of attitude towards things like that. And it has tended to be, you know, I know in the old days, well, not even the old days, just a few years ago, managers could kind of use something like that and you know, do the old cliched siege mentality, you know, and have fellas grit their teeth and really knuckle down. But Dublin never tend to do that, or they haven't done it they never did it under Jim Gavin anyway. You know, trying to use a negative thing. You know, that sort of cliche that Joe Brolly keeps repeating that Colin Cooper said about the thing about the Dubs is they ignore you, you know, when they're on the pitch, and that's the very difficult thing to deal with. They're a bit like that off the pitch as well. I don't think, you know, the kind of noise about the team and, you know, what other opposition managers say and what other players say, if they do pay very much attention to it, they're very good at pretending that they don't.
Do you have a player or two for us to watch this year, Conor, right off the conveyor belt?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and it's difficult. You know, I think all the great players, as in all the Kieran Kilkennys and Brian Fentons, and Con O'Callaghan's, I think they've come through now. Like the next batch, I think will probably, you know, fit in bits and pieces of the team as it sort of naturally erodes. So, like, there's nobody who you would expect that's going to come out and shoot the lights out. I know there's big expectations for Kieran Archer because he had 2 very good under-20 campaigns, but, you know, it's a different level now, particularly physically. And if you look at the inside forward line that he's trying to break into, you know, it's going to take him a year or two to get there. Like last year, there was a big question for Dublin, as there was in the previous couple of years, about midfield. And like during the league, Dessie Farrell brought back in Craig Diaz from Kilmacud Crokes after nearly 10 years of inter-county football. Emmett O'Conneilla played a league game as well. He was out for a while. And ultimately, they went with Tom Lahiff from St. Jude's for the first couple of rounds of the championship. And he, I think, sort of lost his place in a bit of a reshuffle with James McCarthy for the Leinster final. So, like, there is a spot beside Brian Fenton up for grabs. Like, I think Brian Howard will probably revert to the half-forward line because, you know, again, I know he came off the bench in last year's All-Ireland final, but he kind of solves so many problems because he's such a you know, range of talents that, you know, I think wing forward suits him. So, like, you'd be looking at a couple of players who have already been there and gone away and come back. Possibly Shane Carthy in midfield, who, you know, has brought out a book, an autobiography recently about, you know, his struggles with depression. And you can tell in it that Dessie Farrell was a very influential figure in helping him through that stage. So I would imagine that he'd be very motivated to try and get back into the team. And the other one is Peadar O'Cuffey-Byrne, who was on the squad. I think he was even on the bench for the drawn 2020 All-Ireland final against Kerry. And then last year he was dropped from the squad. But, he's a big unit. He's 6'5". He doesn't need to fill out, and he's well able to move around the park. And I think, midfield is definitely a spot for Dublin. Probably need to nail down a partner for Brian Fenton in the long term. And to me, they would be the two sort of obvious candidates.
All right, it still sounds like they're pretty stacked as things stand. That's not a bad team. Conor, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
Conor McKeon, you can read his stuff in the Irish Independent about GAA. Will says, I didn't like that the Dubs are training, but doubt it's going to make much of a difference at clutch moment in the Champo. Kerry just need to step up and close the deal. No excuses, get it done. With the huge amount of GAA members in Dublin, should there be loads more clubs? Whatever about playing for Dublin, playing senior for your club is becoming out of reach for most club players. And Michael N says, yes, and the influx of rural players has both a detrimental effect in rural clubs and homegrown players coming through in Dublin. It's always the invading hordes of rural people coming to Dublin, stealing your places on the senior teams that has been holding Dublin back so badly that they've won the last 6 All-Ireland in a row.
Well, there's obviously a spine of Brian Fenton, who's from Kerry, Bernard Brogan, who's from Kerry, in that Dublin team. Obviously has helped them down through the years.
OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Tomorrow morning, we're going to hear from Armagh boss Kieran McGeeney. We're going to talk Tyrone with Brian McGuigan. They'll be the contender slot tomorrow. There's the tight five with Neil Tracy, and we're going to chat about some more of the Irish footballers who need a move. Right now, we're going to bring you Pat Nevin on the Football Show.
Pat, I get the impression, for maybe the first time in a long time, you are talking to a bunch of people who have been out playing five-a-side or training or involved in some kind of sport, and they've hopped back in the car and they've flicked on off the ball. And I'd say this evening in particular, they're cramping up and they're gasping, but they're happy because they were back playing some sport. So it's probably a pretty happy Ireland you're talking to, a bunch of people in the car who haven't been in the car for too long.
Yeah, and I'm looking at I don't know what the weather's like in Ireland just now, but it was good enough for me. Got 9 holes in earlier on this evening as well.
Nice.
So all that sort of stuff. No, it's brilliant that we've seen these little bits of release happening in it. It kind of feels at the right time, but we obviously need to keep an eye on it. But there's that brilliant moment where you've sat and watched footballers, running for 90 minutes and doing it every 2 or 3 days and saying, why are they tired? And then you go and run now for the first time with a bunch of mates and you're wrecked and you remember how hard it is to play football.
Yeah, a few wake-up calls this evening, I think. So, Thomas Tuchel, he's starting to quite enjoy this playing Man City lark ahead of a Champions League final. Do you think there is a psychological significance to this, or no?
A little. I would say a little. I don't think there's a gigantic amount. I mean, had Chelsea lost, the last couple of times that Chelsea lost to Man City, it would have been a bit of a kind of yawn. You know what's going on here. Remember the game there at the weekend. Man City had rested quite a lot of players, and kind of important ones as well. De Bruyne, and specifically Mahrez, Foden as well. But then Chelsea had rested 5. So I don't know how much you learned at the weekend, really, about the teams against each other, because when they do meet up in the Champions League final, it's not going to look like that. It's not going to be that sort of system or style from either team, I suspect. I mean, when the team was put out, I was at the Etihad, and when the team was put out at Man City, I was scratching my head thinking, what are you playing here? I have no idea what system you're playing. I was trying everything. I was going 4-2-2-2, but it was kind of, I think he's tried a couple of things, Pep, and just to see what it's like at 3 at the back, etc., against Chelsea. But I mean, Real Madrid tried that 3 at the back against Chelsea, and it didn't work for them either. But you're saying this, Chelsea won the game in 2 in a row, but had Aguero not tried what he tried, and I'm quite offended by Aguero there, because as far as I'm concerned, the worst ever penalty taken in a Man City-Chelsea game was taken by me.
I know.
And I'm really fairly offended that he's kind of having a go at making the worst penalty. So I'm not having it. I don't think it was quite that bad. But the game would have been finished there and then. But what was weird was the Chelsea players just didn't look. They didn't bottle it. They didn't look fazed by Man City, and a lot of teams are fazed by Man City. A lot of them are kind of done by the possession. They weren't done by the possession, and they started doing these kind of battles all over the field, and slowly but surely they started winning them. Now, Alonso against Cancelo, Alonso ended up winning it. The one that surprised me maybe was Mendy against Reece James. And they end up, Reece James won that. And you kept on looking around thinking, wait a minute, you're kind of, there's just no lack of bottle with that Chelsea team. So whatever Tuchel's done, and his tactics have been almost exemplary. You know, since he's come in, he's probably, it's hard to see one thing he's done wrong, no matter who he changes. So will it have an effect in City? Well, I'll tell you what, they would always have taken Chelsea seriously. But now, I mean, you absolutely have to. They scarcely give goals away. The tactics have been really good. They make 5 changes and they don't look any different. Swap people around, they still look just as good. But it's a very weird thing, because 2 months ago, didn't see this at all with Chelsea. Absolutely didn't see it.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, in his 25 games, 17 wins, 6 draws and just the 2 losses, he has the second, and I know it's early days, but he has the second best points per game ratio ever in the Premier League at the moment. Just conceded 9 goals in these 25 games. I would put it to you, there is a very almost visible, you can sense it, a sense of belief in him on the players' part. They are looking around at each other and they almost recognise this guy knows his craft. He is setting us up. Things he's telling us are happening. It's all working. They're almost growing in confidence. And look, I guess, and sorry, this isn't an unfair effort to dance on the managerial Chelsea grave of Frank Lampard at all. But, you know, I found watching Chelsea under Lampard, he made management look very difficult. Like, how do these parts fit together? And got Kante's out on the right-hand side, and this not quite fitting together. This is the squad is not balanced. You know, these were the things being said about Chelsea under Lampard. There's no balance here. You know, we're going to have to go to transfer market again. And then suddenly Tuchel comes in, seems to take a glance around and settles on 3-5-2 straight away, and away they go. I mean, it really is someone learning their craft and someone who's, if not quite mastered their craft, but well on top of it.
I've been watching them so closely and trying to figure out why. And it goes back to what is management. It's getting the best out of the people you are working under you. It doesn't matter what business you're in. And you look at it, and honestly, you watch. I mean, Alonso was out of the picture, right? So he's not used all the time now. But you bring him in, and he goes and wins a game, you know, against Manchester City away from home. You know, and Frank had frozen him.
And Tuchel brought Alonso in first game in charge, and I think Alonso might have scored that day as well. And
part of the reason for that is right at the start, he said, I need to get experienced players, and I'll find out what the kids can do afterwards. But he seems to learn very, very quickly, and making very, very good players better. It's something you often say about Pep. Get very good players and make them exceptional players. And I didn't think I could say it, but N'Golo Kante's far better now, and he was unbelievable before. And people aren't saying, I mean, he was the deeper midfielder this time, but he doesn't play there now. He plays as a much more attack-minded one. He was doing that sometimes with Frank, and people were going, I'm not sure about that. But watching him playing under Tuchel in that slightly more advanced position, it just looks different. So he's basically saying whatever he's saying to them, and they're utterly believing in him. And there was a moment, I was at the Real Madrid game, and there was a moment where Azpilicueta got the ball in the right wing area. I swear he looked just like Eden Hazard the way he was playing. I was like, what are you doing? I just don't get this. So he is extraordinarily getting the best out of players. And then you watch Havertz now, and that's extraordinary. He just looks. I mean, I've described him as a little lost boy, or quite a tall lost boy, right at the start of the season. He just didn't look at home. And now he's playing, and he's treating Real Madrid with disdain, you know. And he's going to, if he went and got English Player of the Year next season, I will not be surprised. Right. He is that good, but I didn't think he would improve and get to his abilities this quickly. But he's an astonishing player. So, but you have to get them all to do it, you know. And if it was simple, they'd all do it. But the other thing is, somehow he's managed to keep them all inside. And that's tough, because you've got about 22 players there.
Yeah.
Every one of them thinks he should be starting the game, yet they're all onside. And that's their personalities, like Giroud and all the rest. That's good personalities. But the rest of them, you know, the clever little tricks, clever things, like when you look back at it now, remember you talking to me about it, and everyone in football was talking about what he'd done with Callum Hudson-Odoi. Was it down at Southampton? Takes him off after bringing him on after 20 minutes. And I remember thinking at the time, I like that, actually. Because he wasn't doing what he's supposed to do. No bad feeling, you're not doing that, just you come off and learn how to do it, then you can come back on again. And he's done it.
And he started on the following Tuesday in the Champions League then?
And it's so that you understand that the manager's not got it in for you. You know, that's the feeling. So everybody knows, actually, no, if he does something, it's not personal. It's because he needs something better. So it is extraordinary. To some degree, they're so much better than some of the parts. The individuals are good and very good, but he's getting so much more out of the group. That's one tiny wee thing I would say.
Yeah.
Remember how good Chelsea got under Conte when they went 3-4-3, and nobody knew how to handle it for a while, and that was great for a season. So he's done 3-4-1-2, and the last 2 or 3 games he's went 3-5-2. But a lot of teams aren't quite ready for it when you do it really, really well. So maybe he's getting a wee bit of a honeymoon out of that. I mean, that's devil's advocate. Maybe he's getting a bit of honeymoon out of that. But it is extraordinary to see, because you're talking, Frank was there and it was struggling, give it 2 or 3 years and bring the kids on and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. You're
now sitting saying, you're 5 games away from the best season in the history of that club.
Yeah.
By a distance.
Yeah.
By a distance. And it's extraordinary to think the turnaround. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is fascinating to watch it. Aguero, by the way, has apologised profusely for this penalty miss. I mean, a little bit overboard. It's where he missed a penalty which cost them the league. Like, it's the most inconsequential penalty miss you can think of. I'd like to apologise to my teammates, the staff, the supporters. It was a bad decision. I take full responsibility. So, look, it is what it is, I suppose. What I wanted to ask you about when it comes to City, 2 things. The first one could be a very quick question, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, because sometimes I wonder, am I seeing things or not? I decided a couple of weeks ago that when I watch City, I always pay attention to certain players, and I don't pay due attention to like a Bernardo Silva or a Gundogan or a Rodri. And I was just thinking a few weeks back, I need to just start watching these. Are these lads any good as well? And I watched Rodri very closely against PSG in the first leg. And then obviously he gave away the goal yesterday, got caught in possession. And it never jumped out to me before. So am I seeing things here? This guy is really slow on the ball, really slow to move it on, really slow to get it out of his feet. I would put it to you, he won't be at the club in 2 to 3 years.
Oddly enough, I think he's another one of those whose physique slightly changed. He looks more cumbersome now because I think he's bulked up just a little bit.
Okay.
There's 1 or 2 players. Remember, John Stones bulked up a bit, and it made him a better player. And he's bulked up a wee bit. And I've noticed recently that some players are really bouncing off him, and he's playing with that. And when you get used to players bouncing off you, tackling you, you can just smoothly go away with it. But there's certain players you can't do that against. I mean, there's certain players that will just rat you, and you will get it back. Don't do that against N'Golo Kante. Don't do that against like Mason Mounts. But there's lots of players throughout the league, so don't do that because you won't get away with it. And I think it does show up a little bit when he feels he can play at that relaxed pace against the very good players, and it does become noticeable. When he's against others, when he's got time and he's got space, he looks great. Yeah. And that physique has actually helped him a lot. I don't think it's made him quicker. I'd agree with you with that. But I wouldn't write him off yet. I think he's kind of pulling together a couple of different things. Because when players come to England, the vast majority of them, it takes a while. They need to understand the game, what his physical necessities are. And for some of them, it is, well, I need to bulk up a wee bit here. I need to be more physical. I need to be, that little bit more energy about me in the game. And sometimes you can overdo that. So I wouldn't write him off the same way. Okay. I would say check him next season with another pre-season under him, and I think you'll be okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm working off a small sample size, so I mean, I'm judging him harshly. To be fair, PSG pressed like nobody's business in that game as well, so maybe it wasn't so easy in there. So Pep has kind of settled, one last one on these two. Pep has kind of settled on this rotating 4 of Bernardo Silva and Mahrez and De Bruyne and Foden, and it seems to be working really well. So why does that work so well, and where is Sterling in the mix here? You would have watched him, I'm sure, closely enough at the weekend.
Honestly, it was a soap opera watching Raheem Sterling the weekend. Honestly, this particular battle, talking about individual battles in the game, it was him versus Azpilicueta, and Azpilicueta won hands down. Now, considering he's so much quicker than Azpilicueta, and he should have done much better. He's a good player, Azpilicueta, and he's on his best form at the moment. But he just kept getting angrier and angrier and angrier as the game went on. And I have to back Raheem here. The referee gave him the square root of nothing. Right. It got embarrassing after a while. he was getting fouled time and again, and the referee would give a foul to every other player in the park, but wouldn't give it to him. It seemed really odd, as if it was something personal. It really jumped out at me at the game, and it kind of shouldn't really, but it really jumped out. And then he just kept on getting more frustrated and more petulant and more angry and trying harder and not just playing his normal game. And the reason why he's trying harder, it's the classic one. Even the very best players do it. If they're not in the team, they try too hard and do things they shouldn't be doing. And he's right in that cusp. Do you know the player I remember doing this most that really upset me? It was Kevin De Bruyne at Chelsea. Honestly, he just kept on trying too hard. And I said, don't do that. Just play your game. But there's nothing, everyone wants you to try hard, don't you? Everyone wants you to put tackles in and try to do something absolutely brilliant every time you get the ball. But it's about choosing the times. But Raheem, honestly, I was surprised he lasted after half-time. I mean, he got the goal, didn't he? But I was really surprised because I thought he was an absolute stick when he get sent off. He was getting that ratted. So I don't think he's in a good place at the moment because of where he is and because he knows out of 4, 5, 6, he's probably number 5 or number 6 in that group now. And he's doing the wrong things to get out of it.
Yeah.
But I utterly understand why he's trying to do it. So he's not one of them. But Mahrez back at his very, very best is brilliant to see. And he is, generally at his very best. And De Bruyne, we know about and Foden. So it's kind of De Bruyne and Foden. When you get to the Champions League final, they will be playing. If they're fit, they will be playing. Probably Gundogan, he'll be playing. And it's whether you can fit in the other one. And I suspect the other one will try and get in there at some point. They'll try and get Gundogan alongside Bernardo Silva as well. It's trying to fit all those players in. But if you're not playing with an out-and-out centre forward, you can stick another one of them in there because they all take it in turns. And when I've gone to see them when they've been at their best this season, there's no point in trying to guess who's centre forward because it's 5 of them and they all take it in turns and they just rotate it. And it's back to this old Dutch thing that they used to do with Ajax and all that. So it's a brilliant plan. The thing is, if anyone can sort it out and figure it out, it's Tuchel. He seems to be the one that seems to have a wee handle on those sort of things. So he's a special coach. So don't know who it's going to be. But at the moment, I'm already looking forward to the Champions League final, whether it's in Wembley or Portugal or whatever. Sounds like Portugal at the moment, but we'll find out.
Yeah. So I didn't realise, so Ajax went, I know rotation was obviously a kernel of their play, but did they go with a false 9? They would at times not have like a recognised out-and-out striker? Because the first I heard of it obviously was with Spain back when Cesc was doing it in one of the Euros 10 years ago. I know, it's original from, you say Cruyff, but it was Cruyff's coach. So it was all the way from there. The total football thing, it was this, we used to describe it as a circular thing. So Cruyff found himself at right back or left wing. It kind of didn't matter because they all were able to play comfortable in each position and just rotate all the time. And it wasn't set, but everybody understood each other's game well enough that they could cover all the time and move and change. And that's why they called it total football. And did they take it to this extreme whereby I look at Bernardo Silva, De Bruyne, Foden and Mahrez and none of them is a striker? Like I totally get if you have an out-and-out number 9 and he finds himself rotating in the mix with others, but this seems like it's another level altogether. There's actually no strike. It's not like Aguero is rotating in that 4.
No, you're right. If you've got a striker, it kind of sets it because the others rotate around it. But if you've not got a striker, it kind of opens it up. Now, it can be a wee bit toothless if you've not got really good players who are all willing to work and go beyond the defences when it's their time to do it. And the classic one, I'm old enough to have watched Cruyff play. And I can remember as a kid, I was very young at the time, I was probably early teens, and thinking, I have no idea where you play. I just don't. I can't tell because you want to think, oh, you're left. No, you're not left when you're right back. No, you're there. You're there. You're everywhere. You're 10. You're everything. And you try to get a handle on it, and it took you a while to get your mind around. Actually, you're not actually playing anywhere, are you? You're like the rest of them. Not all of them, and that was maybe the first step. And after that, it just develops and develops, and it brought to its pinnacle, obviously, with Barca and with the Spain team when they had almost perfection in that. And of course they adapted that. If that wasn't working, they could put a striker in, but that's kind of where it comes from. In my mind, there's a direct line. It goes from Cruyff at Ajax, and then he takes it to Barca, and they develop it, and then they've got it at Barca, And then you've got Pep, and he develops it, and it's a kind of direct line where it all comes to. It's now at Man City, and it's a version of it. It's not the same thing, because nothing stays static in football. But you can see that's what he's trying to do. It's that sort of area, and it goes all the way back to. And I think there's a lot of people. I don't know if you've read the book. Is it Sam Cooper, The Beautiful Orange?
Brilliant Orange. Yeah,
Brilliant Orange. Yeah,
I've read it. Yeah.
And exactly, and there's bits in that explain some of the thinking behind it, but it depends on the players you've got, because there's no point in trying doing that if you've not got the right developed players for that. But at the moment, City are not far off it. They're pretty good at it, I think.
Yeah. David Winner, by the way, I just double checked. I knew it wasn't Cooper, but it was he's out of the same kind of family. Cooper could have written a book like that as well. David Winner, Brilliant Orange, well worth. If you haven't read it, it is a great book. The Neurotic Genius.
It's here somewhere in my book.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, The Neurotic Genius of Dutch Football. Yeah, I guess. Look, when you mentioned the Cruyff thing to Pep, I mean, it is amazing. It's not like we're talking 6 degrees of separation there. So you can see the lineage.
It's so direct because. He played under him and all that, and it's just there.
Yeah.
The similarities are too obvious to miss. And if all you need to do is talk to Pep, and he'll tell you.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I really do feel, hope rather that whenever he hangs up his managerial boots, that Pep sits down with a documentary maker and says, you know what, this stuff from Cruyff and all, and where I took it, it really is so damn interesting. Here are all my secrets. Here it is for the world, and shares it all and gives all the thinking. It would just be an absolute joy to really get into that.
There was another book, Pep Confidential, that was done. He said, looking away at his bookcase again, try to find it, make sure you get the right.
Yeah, I never read that.
Yeah, so I mean, I've read them as the years have gone by, and just to keep an eye on it, but. They're not going to give you everything.
No.
They can't give you everything because they're still doing it.
Yes.
And they are still developing it. And you end up, it works so well, and it's such a joy to watch half the time that I end up saying, right, okay, that's all brilliant. Now, where's the errors? Where's the weakness? Where's the gap? And that's what you have to do, And one of the two of the things, and again, so take it as read. And that, by the way, all Man United fans out there, right? Because I annoyed them the other week. Take it as read that he's brilliant. Okay, Pep, as I said the other week, take it as read, I don't like the Glazers, and I don't want them to stay right. And then you say, but this is the problem. And then people say, you side with the Glazers. Oh, Twitter, man. But anyway, take it as read that Pep's brilliant. But what are his weaknesses? So he has got a slight propensity to overthink. And I've noticed in a few... And I think most people have, particularly in the latter stages of the Champions League, he kind of overthinks it, and you think, you don't need to be that clever in this occasion. You actually just need to do what your group was doing there with a tiny tweak. And I've watched them doing that a few times, and if there is a problem they've got for the Champions League final, it's if he overthinks it and starts getting Tuchel getting in his head. And that is actually a wee possibility.
It's true. He's resisted the temptation thus far to pull a Leon like he did last season. So we'll see.
I've watched him do it this season, a couple of games, and then he's changed it.
Okay.
When he's got it wrong. There was one brilliant time when he put Jesus out left wing. I was at the game, and honestly, it was horrendous.
Well, I could have told him that. On Manchester United, we're going to be hearing more about this game with Brian Kerr, who's coming up with Nathan in a few minutes. But I did just want to ask you about Mason Greenwood, because he did hit a pretty significant landmark. In fairness, he has become Manchester United's highest scoring teenager in Premier League history. So he scored the second goal against Villa. That is his 16th in the English top flight. Rooney had got to 15. Now, to be fair to Rooney, he had also scored as a teenager for Everton, as people know. But it means Greenwood has hit 28 goals in all competitions for Manchester United as a teenager, which is pretty impressive. Only 2 have scored more in all competitions for Manchester United in history. Do you care to guess?
2 have scored more?
Yeah, then Greenwood's 28 in all competitions. And this is not just Premier League, just all time.
For his age?
For Man United, yeah, as a teenager.
Oh, God, that's good. You'd think it was Giggs.
No.
No. It can't be Best. So, no, go on, throw it.
George Best.
Best. Oh,
Yeah.
why do I say it can't be best?
I know. George Best got to 37, and the record holder, in fairness, the forgotten man in so many ways,
no.
and but for injury, Norman Whiteside.
Norman, I'm dying to get it out there before you said it, because
Yeah.
how could I forget Norman? Because obviously he was so young when he started.
Yeah.
But you forget him because he played midfield a lot of the time, and he's going for those sort of positions. So now, but Greenwood, the thing about Greenwood is he is one of those absolutely brilliantly classically natural goal scorers. You know, when he hits the ball, almost always, there was a wee period there, he had a little wobble, but when he hits it, it's on target, it's with power, and it's in a corner. And it sounds really simple, that, but have a look at how many players have shots at goals that fly over.
Yeah.
He hits it on target from whatever angle. It's in a corner. Keeper has to make a save, or it goes in. It sounds like simple stuff, but he's absolutely magnificent at it. And it's, you know, he's had a little kind of dip, but when you look at him, he could be extraordinary.
Well, it's funny, and on the dip, so I hadn't realised actually. I've just kind of seen his best friend died in desperately sad circumstances in October. And you remember Solskjaer came out a while back and was talking about how he wasn't getting enough sleep and he needs to learn how to look after himself. I suspect more has gone on there behind the scenes. Based only on that, I haven't heard anything. But I'd say he's had to be managed a bit this year. Plus, Jesus, he's a 19-year-old playing for Manchester United. I mean, your head's going to spin a bit. So I'd say maybe they've had to massage him through a bit there. But the talent is frightening. Like Shearer was talking about the Cavani signing and saying, like, for him, Alan Shearer, that is, it's all about Cavani. He's going to the very, very top of the game. He's going to be up there with the very best goal scorers, I have no doubt. And he was talking, like you were, about hitting the target, the short back lift. Like, he does just score goals out of nothing.
Yeah, and they don't seem on.
Yeah.
It's that timing of hitting it. You know, certain strikers that hit the ball one stride or half a stride earlier than everybody else does. And I can never quite figure out how they do it, because I tried to do it myself. You just can't. You either can or you can't do it. And it's a brilliant ability, because the keepers, they'll always talk about this, getting themselves set, and they don't get themselves set in the right way. So it goes by them, and you think, oh, why was he not ready for that? It's because they watch your body shape, they manipulate the position, and then they're ready, and then they go down. But they've not got the body position yet. The ball's past them.
Yeah.
Because he does this. And you know, some strikers used to tell me about, you know, deliberately trying to go slightly wide and aim it between legs. You know, if they get between the keepers never set between legs. The reason being they can't set for it, because they have to set the other side of it. So they always tell you those little technical things, the keepers. But the ones that they hated, the things that they always hated, the ones that went through the legs, people that hit earlier than expected on a half stride, which is, I just didn't know how to do it. I just couldn't do it because I never get any power on it.
Yeah.
Greenwood could do it with power. And the other thing, which is the related thing, is the toe poke. They hate toe pokes. They can't stand toe pokes because they can't read them. And everybody slaughters toe pokes for being an unskillful thing, but they are unreadable because there's no back left and there's no angle and there's nothing like that. So keepers hate them as well. But Greenwood seems to have that phenomenal ability to get that pure power from nowhere, from nothing, from distance.
Yeah. And
it's, as I say, it's always on target.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. For us mere mortals, it's hard to imagine practicing short backlift. You know, like it's actually a skill you would think now you should try and teach an underage player because it's so deadly. But yeah, I don't know how you kick the ball hard doing it.
I don't know, because I had a coach once who completely deconstructed when I was about 13.
Right.
Deconstructed my whole kicking action. You know, like a golfing coach. And, you know, you kind of, it takes a while, because anyone who knows if you deconstruct your golf swing, you're going to be garbage for a while while you get it right. So it's kind of a hard thing to do. You almost have to have it struck earlier. I mean, if you watch him, it's kind of funny. You watch him kick a ball, and then you watch the boy behind him, Wan-Bissaka, try to kick a ball, who can't actually kick a ball. So it's really funny. It's the ultimate opposite. But I think there are certain things, but to be fair, it's just natural. You know, you just actually naturally can and do it, or you don't. It's very hard. I've never known anyone who's learned it.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our